quorum. So I will call this meeting of the April 13th Plan Commission to order. I am going to call first on our tech facilitator to explain a bit about how this meeting will be structured, since it's new for all of us as a remote meeting. So Jesse, are you the one who's going to?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. This is Jesse Poole. He's with our tech staff. So thank you, Jesse.
Well, welcome to our virtual Plan Commission meeting. We're going to cover a few basic items before beginning. To the members of the commission and city staff, the chair, clerk, and technical facilitator are responsible for muting and unmuting committee members. Please be mindful that during any roll call, all panelists will be unmuted until completed, at which time the chair will place panelists back on mute. Voting will be considered unanimous. However, if you object to a unanimous vote, please use the raise hand feature when the chair asks for objections. After clicking participant at the bottom of your screen, you can find the raise hand feature at the bottom of your participants list. Also, use the raise hand feature when you'd like to be recognized to speak or ask for questions. This includes staff who are being asked a question. The chair will do their best to call on committee members in order which hands are raised. Lowering your hand will take you out of the queue. Please wait for the chair to unmute you before speaking. If you lose connection at any point during the meeting, you can reconnect by clicking on the link or calling the number of your original email. If you are watching the live stream, please mute the stream now. There's a 30 to 40 second delay, and the audio will cause feedback when you're unmuted. Members of the public who have registered to speak, when your name is called, the facilitator will find your name based on the name you provided in your registration and permit you to speak. Please wait until you are unmuted to begin talking. The clerk will tell you when your time is up. If you need to share documentation with the council, please send it via email to planning@cityofmadison.com. Unless there are questions of you from the council, you will be unable to speak for the remainder of the meeting. In order to keep the meeting with the best quality we can, if you do not wish to speak, we encourage you to go watch the meeting streamed at cityofmadison.com/city channel or at YouTube user City of Madison, or find us on Spectrum 994 and Uverse 99. Chair, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Proceeding with our agenda, the next item is public comment, and I don't believe we have any general public comment. I'll look to Ms. Stouter for confirmation. Okay, no general public comment. Moving on then to disclosures and recusals. Do any members of the body have any disclosures or recusals? I'll look for the raised hand feature. Seeing none, thank you. I will move on to the first item on our agenda, Legistar 60134, which is general public correspondence to the Plan Commission. Are there any questions or comments in regard to the general public correspondence? Seeing none, I will move on to the minutes. We will be looking at the minutes of the March 9th regular meeting. Do I have a motion for approval of those minutes? Hold on here. Mr. Cantrell.
Yes, I move approval of the minutes.
And Mr. Rui.
I'll second both of those.
Thank you. Any questions or comments, concerns? Seeing none, all those in favor, I'll assume,
Don't worry about it.
yeah, oh, okay. I will assume a unanimous vote unless I see a raised hand objecting.
Okay, we're back.
Thank you. It's going to take me a little while to get used to some of this muting and unmuting thing, so thanks for your patience. Okay, now moving on to the schedule of meetings. The next regular meeting will be April 27th, followed by a meeting on May 11th and May 18th. Okay, moving on then to routine business. The following items listed in this section of the agenda are referred to the Plan Commission as generally required by Section 62.23(2) Wisconsin statutes and Section 16.01 of the Madison General Ordinances, which require that the Common Council refer any question concerning the location of any public building, the location, extension, or widening of any street, park, or other public grounds within the city to the Plan Commission for its consideration and report regarding consistency with the city's comprehensive plan before final action is taken. Further, the Plan Commission is required to provide a recommendation to the council on the acquisition of public land for the establishment or enlarging of streets, parks, playgrounds, sites for public buildings, and reservations pertaining to the same, and the conveyance of any surplus real estate not needed for these purposes. Real estate so as to protect the public works of the city and to preserve the view, appearance, light, air, and usefulness of such public works and to promote the public health and welfare as recommended in adopted plans and policies. Item number 2 under routine business, Legistar 60082, authorizing the execution of a release of drainage swale direction restrictions within Lot 34 of the plat of Old Sauk Trail, 2nd edition, together with a partial release of non-exclusive drainage easement within Lot 63 of the plat of Old Sauk Trail, 6th edition, in the 9th Alder District. Do I have a motion to approve? Commissioner Cantrell.
I move approval of the routine business item.
Thank you. Do I have a second? Commissioner Hagenow.
I second the motion.
Thank you. Okay, any questions or concerns in regard to this particular item? Seeing none, I will assume a unanimous vote unless I see a raised hand objecting. Okay, unanimously approved. Thank you. Since we have not reached 5:45, the time at which we can begin the public hearings, I will ask for Ms. Stouter to please move to her secretary's report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. We'll have our regular meeting on April 27th, and you can all see the items that will be heard during that meeting. I'll mention one, the first one listed there, 2122 Luann Lane, a conditional use for an office building conversion into a 17-unit apartment building. And on May 11th, we'll have quite a heavy meeting, and I want to explain one of the reasons why. We'll have all of the items that have been requiring approval or review or approval by the Urban Design Commission. The Urban Design Commission will meet on April 29th, and they've missed a couple of meetings during the last few weeks. And so we'll see at that May 11th meeting quite a few items that have been waiting for that Urban Design Commission review. And I want to mention several items on that meeting. First on your list there, 2524 Winnebago Street. This is part of the Union Corners development on the corner of East Washington Avenue and Milwaukee Street, the new mixed-use building with 105 apartments. Below that, 1109 to 1123 South Park Street. This is a demolition and conditional use for a new 3-story mixed-use building with 44 apartment units. A little bit further down the list, 3040 and 3046 Commercial Avenue and 701 McCormick Avenue. This is a rezoning, a demolition, and a conditional use to demolish a single-family residence and to construct a 4-unit apartment building and 3 8-unit apartment buildings. 702 Gardner Road. This is one of the new street names associated with the project at Madison Yards on the near west side, near Hill Farms. This is a planned development for approval of a 6-story mixed-use building with 189 apartments. And then 4728 Sheboygan Avenue, associated with that same overall project, a specific implementation plan to construct a commercial building and central green open space. And then 5567 Odana Road, demolition permit and conditional use to construct a 5-story mixed-use building with 79 apartment units. A little further down the list, 601 Bayview. This is a demolition permit and conditional use for several residential structures at Bayview today to take a phased approach and construct a residential building complex to replace those structures. And then finally, the last one I'll list is 2219 Monroe Street. This is a conditional use request by Edgewood to install lighting for the high school stadium area. And so those are the items currently on our May 11th list. And that's all I'll share at this point. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. It is still not 5:45, so I will move to business by members. This is an item you should have gotten a memo from me in regard to this item. It is an initiative to continue our discussion really in regard to sustainability. And this was at the initiation really of Commissioner Sundquist, and I'm grateful to him for that. And so we will be then, he will be leading that effort, and he is including a member or members as indicated in my memo from the Madison Sustainability Committee. So if you have an interest in this, do contact Commissioner Sundquist. We do want to make sure that we're sensitive to this particular time, given the minimal number of meetings that we want to have. And so it will proceed as more of an informal discussion. Commissioner Sundquist, do you have any information that you would like to add?
That's a good summary, thanks. I just should stress that this is not a formal body. We were cautioned against even calling it a work group by the city attorney's office. So it's a few members from various committees just sort of taking John Strange up on his suggestion to look more broadly at sustainability and our standards of practices and ordinances. Don't know what we're going to do, but we have had one call I don't know what we're going to end up with, but we've had one call. We're going to try to sort of go through the many planning documents that we have before us, starting with the comp plan, but including the sustainability plan, the energy plans and transportation plans, and kind of look at all of the aspirations there and see where we might come back to whatever appropriate body or staff member with suggestions for improvements might be. And So happy to talk to folks about that. We do want to be cautious about quorum, though. So one reason that we're keeping it kind of small is that we don't want to create a new body that has to post meetings and meet during this time. If we didn't have coronavirus, we might just post it and let whoever shows up. But at this nascent stage of this conversation, just a few of us talking, and we'll see where it goes.
Thank you again, Commissioner Sundquist. And I anticipate that there will be opportunities for commissioners to continue conversations on some of our other big picture kinds of items, like our one having to do with housing. So do think about things that you might want to have more conversation and get into more deeply. Once this very difficult time of the coronavirus and the difficulty meeting ends, as Commissioner Sundquist said, if there are a number of people interested in having some of these conversations, then we will post those as meetings. Okay, it is now past the hour of 5:45, so we will move on to our public hearings. It is the custom of the Plan Commission to remove from the agenda those items on which staff believes an application has had sufficient review to warrant approval with all of the conditions placed upon it by various city departments, and on which the applicant accepts those conditions, and there are no individuals who have registered to speak in opposition to the item tonight. These items, along with referrals, are placed onto a consent agenda, and they're addressed at the beginning of our public hearing section of our meeting, so that people on those items then can disconnect from our meeting. They hopefully will not need to go home. They probably are already there. So there is also the opportunity for members of the commission to request separation, in which case the item is removed from the consent agenda and taken in the regular course of business. Of the items before us today, the following are proposed for the consent agenda. Agenda item 7, 9, and then 11 is going to be a referral to April 27th. And on the consent agenda, item 12, 14, 15 for referral. On the consent agenda, items 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, and 21. Are there any commissioners who would like any of those items separated out and taken off of the consent agenda? I do not see any raised. Oh, wait a second. I do. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Chair. I raised my hand for the last item. I have a question. So maybe we could dispense with this and bring it back, table it. I had questions for staff about the proposal, and I really won't be satisfied unless we can discuss it some more, but I'm willing, we should go forward and do our business.
Okay, so are you asking for it to be reconsidered, or are...
I'm not sure what the appropriate move is. I had my hand up and it wasn't acknowledged and I had questions. So it was never approved. So I don't know how I could reconsider it. I felt we weren't, I wasn't done asking questions about how we can have such a body when we've been told so firmly that we cannot be meeting. And so I just wanted to make sure the Plan Commission knows like what this is supposed to look like and how it would work.
Okay, thank you, Alder Rummel. We did have a conversation with Attorney Strange, and as Commissioner Sundquist mentioned, we are aiming to have it be quite informal and simply help us move some ideas along. Anything that comes out of those discussions would then come before the Plan Commission. And if there does seem to be the kind of interest which would require these conversations to be noticed, then we would have to wait until after the coronavirus situation resolves.
I guess I'm a little concerned that there'll be people from other committees working with us, and I'm interested, by the way, Mr. Sundquist, that, you know, it's going to be a topic of interest, and that it would appear then that we're just a small group are meeting behind the scenes. That's how my first flush of interpretation, and I certainly don't want to add a burden to IT staff, but it does seem to me something that should be looked at again as far as public access to the discussion, even if it's just our first go around. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We can have some further conversations about that because, again, the aim is to hopefully move things forward that we're aiming to accomplish, but not burden our IT staff or staff of the Plan Commission. So thank you, Alder Rummel. Okay, moving on then with the consent agenda. The first item on the consent agenda is item 7, Legistar 59630, creating section 28.022 through 00431 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at properties located at 6302, 6402 through 6418 Driscoll Drive, 3rd Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan and creating section 28.022 through 00432 to amend a planned development district to approve a specific implementation plan. The next item on the consent agenda is agenda item 9, Legistar 59520, approving the revised preliminary plat and final plat of the American Center East Park 3rd Edition on property addressed as 4709 through 4851 East Park Boulevard, 7th Alder District. The next item is a referral, agenda item 11, to the April 27th meeting, Legistar 59187. It's revised 5133 through 5237 University Avenue, 9th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an office building and restaurant, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment zoning district for multi-family dwellings, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for a dwelling unit in mixed-use building, consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for live-work units, and consideration of a conditional use in the suburban employment district for accessory outdoor recreation to construct a mixed-use development containing 11,150 square feet of commercial space and 79 apartments in 3 buildings. The next item on the consent agenda is agenda item 12, Legistar 59521, located at 4933 Femright Drive, 16th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence as part of the extension of Dairy Drive between East Broadway and Femright Drive. Agenda item 14, Legistar 59523, located at 5825 Cottage Grove Road, 16th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to allow a two-family residence to be demolished to create open space for a convent and place of worship. And then agenda item 15, which is a referral to our May 11th meeting, located Legistar 59537, located at 3817 Milwaukee Street, 15th Alder District. Consideration of a demolition permit to demolish an auto service station, convenience store, restaurant, and car wash. Consideration of a conditional use in the commercial center district for an auto service station and convenience store, and consideration of a conditional use in the commercial center district for a car wash to allow an existing auto service station, convenience store, restaurant, and car wash to be raised, and for a new auto service station, convenience store, and car wash to be built as part of a planned multi-use site. Agenda item 16, Legistar 59538, located at 1101 Woodward Drive, 18th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use for a lakefront development to allow reconstruction of the shelter building at Warner Beach. Agenda item 17, Legistar 59684, located at 1438 Morrison Street, 16th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional residential consistent 4 district to construct accessory building exceeding 576 square feet and exceeding 10% of the lot area. Legistar agenda item 18, Legistar 59686, located at 110 King Street, 4th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the downtown core district for a tasting room. Agenda item 19, Legistar 59687, located at 50 Lansing Street, 15th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence and construct a new single-family residence. Agenda item 20, Legistar 59688, located at 221 Bram Street, 14th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence for use of the property by the stormwater utility. And finally, agenda item 21, Legistar 59931, located at 601 West Dayton Street, 4th Alder District, consideration of an alteration to an approved plan development district to allow construction of a 38,000 square foot addition to the cold center. Do I have a motion? Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll move approval of the consent agenda, including the referrals.
Thank you. And do I have a second? Do I have a second for the consent agenda?
Second.
Alder Heck? Okay, thank you. Okay, I want to check to see if we have any public comment or registrants to note for any of these items. is a little more difficult than it might otherwise be. We have a registrant for item 7, Frank Seltzner, 1567 State Road of Marshall, Wisconsin, in support but not wishing to speak, available to answer questions. Sorry, it's got to scroll through. Agenda item 12, Janet Schmidt of our engineering department, 210 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Agenda item 14, Robert Arntz, in support, not wishing to speak, representing the Sisters of Mary, located at Cottage Grove Road. And that is it for the registrants. Any questions of the registrants? Commissioner Rui, did you have?
I had one question is, I don't recall you reading item number 7 as being on the consent.
Well, in case I didn't, I will do that then after this general consent as a second consent. I thought I had, but I could have missed that. Thank you, Commissioner Rui.
Chair Zellers, I also had a question of staff, probably Matthew Tucker, regarding item number 17. But I intend to vote yes. I just have a question.
Okay. I am looking for.
I see his name on the list.
I'm not finding it for whatever reason.
I just unmuted him.
Thank you.
Sorry about that. I didn't raise my hand. Different screen. I apologize.
Yes, staff, if you are called on, please raise your hand so that we can find you easier.
The question I have is, I understand there's a moratorium on accessory buildings. Does that mean this one is going to go through?
I think the question you're asking, Mr. Rui, relates to the building inspection department's ability to process building permits during this pandemic time. We just have established a procedure or process for construction, and in consideration of the governor's requirements on what is essential construction and whatnot. I can tell you that we are looking this week at starting to approve those projects again, or get them ready to be approved when the limits on construction are lifted. It's only a limit on construction, not on approvals itself.
So this one is going to be approved with a permit?
Well, it can be approved tonight, and then the construction permit will need to follow through in consistency with our requirements and with the governor's limitation on construction.
Okay, great answer. Thank you.
Any other questions?
Chair, I have a quick comment. There was another registrant that came in for item 7, and that is Tony Magestro, and he is registered in support, does not wish to speak, 1515 Case Road in Stoughton, Wisconsin.
Thank you very much. Okay, with that, is there any objection to recording a unanimous vote on the consent agenda? And I will come back to agenda item 7, although I thought I had read that one, but I'll come back to that. I see no objection, so we will record a unanimous vote. And then agenda item 7 as the consent item 59630, creating section 28.022 through 00431 of the Madison General Ordinance to amend a planned development district at properties located at 6302 and 6402 through 6418 Driscoll Drive, 3rd Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan and creating section 28.022 through 00432 to amend a planned development district to approve a specific implementation plan. Do I have a motion to add that to the consent agenda? Commissioner Cantrell.
Move approval of item number 7.
Thank you. And
I second.
Alder Lemmer.
I second.
Thank you. And then again, I will assume a unanimous.
Madam Chair, I'm sorry. There are a few other registrants on later items, starting with I think item 16 and 18, 19, and 20. Would you like for me to read those, or?
Yes, could you please?
Sure.
Thank you.
Item 16, all in support, not wishing to speak. Sarah Lerner, 210 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. Melissa Destree, 222 West Washington Avenue, number 310, Madison. Laura Amundson, 210 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard. And then item 18, support, not wishing to speak. Tom Dufek, 5353 Maley Road, Sun Prairie, Wisconsin. And item 19, Rhonda Plord, 802 Stony Hill Lane, Cottage Grove, Wisconsin, not wishing to speak in support. And then finally, item 20, Janet Schmidt, 210 Martin Luther King Jr. Boulevard, in support, not wishing to speak.
Thank you, Ms. Stouter. And again, I will assume unanimous vote unless I see objection. I do not see a raised hand objecting. Thank you. Okay, then moving on to the ones that are not on the consent agenda. Items 5 and 6 are, 3 and 4 were taken off the consent agenda. And those should be considered together. Agenda item 3, Legistar 59131, creating section 28.022 through 0048 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at property located at 7050 Watts Road, 1st Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan. And agenda item 4, 57809, approving a certified survey map of property owned by 7050 Watts Road LLC, located at 7050 Watts Road, 1st Alder District. And do we have a presentation by staff on that? Ms. Stouter?
Yes, Kevin Furco's prepared, and I think hand raised.
Okay. Okay, Mr. Furco.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Members of the Plan Commission, before you this evening are 2 items. The first is item 3, and this is an amendment to an approved plan development, general development plan. This is a change to allow for an approximately 10,000 square foot single story building in a portion of it to be developed in the future in a portion of the parking lot and existing landscape buffer. Again, I wanted to stress that this is only a general development plan approval that's being requested at this time. More detailed plans, including a specific implementation plan, would be required prior to development occurring. This approval would allow for the basic right, again, to establish an approximately 10,000 square foot single story building in a portion of the parking lot and landscape buffer. The second request is a related certified survey map to create 2 development lots to carve off this second development site. As noted in the staff report, this proposal has been to the Urban Design Commission, as all plan developments are. You'll note that as in the report and on Legistar, there are two sets of files. There was an original submittal that UDC did not recommend approval of, and a second development plan that UDC ultimately recommended approval of, as noted in your materials. That approval maintained a larger portion of the landscape buffer as shown in the attached plans, and reconfigured other portions of the site. On balance, staff believes the proposal is consistent with the general commercial recommendation in the comprehensive plan and is consistent with the approval standards. Staff will be available to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Furkow. Alder Harrington McKinney, did you wish to speak now or after the public hearing?
I can, or the registrants for the public hearing, there should have been one.
Yes, there are at least two, and I don't know whether some have come in since I got this list.
Okay, then if the chair is amenable, I can wait until after those comments.
That would be fine, whichever you would like.
Thank you. Yeah, okay. I will wait until the public comment.
Okay. Okay, then I will open the public hearing. The first registrant is Daniel Stewart, 2591 Dallas Parkway, Suite 300, Frisco, Texas, in support and wishing to speak. And he is, as I understand it, representing the applicant. Mr. Stewart. Okay, you are on, Mr. Stewart.
Great. Good evening. My name is Daniel Stewart. I am representing At Home, who is the current owner of that property. Kevin did a great job of just summarizing our request tonight, which is to create a second lot within our existing lot to allow for some development of what is currently being used mostly as just an overflow parking area. We don't currently use that efficiently for our parking needs. It's just some extra pavement out there that we think would be a great opportunity to come in and redevelop. We do not have any specific users, tenants, or buyers at this time for that lot. All we're trying to do is to make the allowance for that lot to be created, so that then we could go out and see what interest would be available for that. I'm happy to answer any questions that you may have. I know that we went through some site planning exercises with UDC in order to increase some of that landscape buffer along Watts Road. I think we have a pretty good plan that they were happy with and still allows us a reasonable area to create a development site within that plot. But happy to answer any further questions that you guys may have.
Are there any questions of the applicant? Commissioner Cantrell.
I just had one question. There is a large landscape buffer along Watts Road and a lot of mature trees, conifers and deciduous. I'm hoping that with the development alteration that's submitted, that you're going to be preserving as many of those trees as possible. I guess I just wanted to hear what you had to say about that.
Yes, you're correct. That was an item that was brought up by UDC as well, which caused us to revise the site plan accordingly. And yes, the goal would be to keep any trees that were reasonable to save with this new development. Obviously, we did not do any detailed grading analysis or anything like that to determine which would be allowed to stay and which would have to be removed. But I think there are a good number that without a doubt would stay. And the goal would be that with the new building that was coming in, if there was an opportunity to save even more, we would do that.
Great, thank you.
Did you have any other questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
That's the only one, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Are there any other questions of the applicant? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Seeing none, Alder Harrington McKinney, did you wish to speak?
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. I do wish to speak. I met with the applicant and I am supportive of the recommendation. What is before you is the former Sam's Club site, and it is a commercial building on a very large parking lot, and the opportunity to really develop and turn that into a more viable property is absolutely something that we would be interested in District 1. And what I'm really interested in is that the surrounding land uses around that property. It is adjacent to Walmart. Across the street, there are family buildings and units, multi-family buildings, and the potential of the usage of that property is absolutely exciting and will be an added benefit to that area in District 1. So I am in supportive. I read the recommendations of the staff, and I am fully supportive of those recommendations put forward by the staff.
Thank you, Alder. I'm looking for a motion on this particular item. Commissioner Cantrell.
Sure. I'll move that the Plan Commission find that the zoning amendments and the plan development amendment be consistent with the zoning ordinance, and forward that to the City Council with a favorable recommendation. Subject to an additional condition that the developer preserve as many of the trees along the Watts Road frontage as possible.
Thank you. Commissioner Rui.
I'll second that.
Thank you. Any comments, questions? Commissioner Sundquist. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Commissioner Cantrell.
I was just wanting to speak to the motion, my motion, and indicate that this is a nice infill development, and that I'm very supportive of the new development on this site. I think it's going to fit in quite nicely.
Thank you. And we do have a comment from staff, Mr. Firch.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. I just wanted to get a clarification on the motion, because I believe the motion dealt with item 3, but not on item 4, the CSM.
CSM as submitted.
Okay. So, Commissioner Cantrell, you added that one to your motion?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And without objection, then, thank you. Yes, and Commissioner Sundquist.
Yeah, and just a comment, and I appreciate the additional condition that Mr. Cantrell is suggesting. I just wonder if staff might be able to comment on the enforceability of something that says as much as possible, and who would decide how much is possible, and would this do anything, or would it create uncertainty, or is it benign and just a nice feel-good thing, or just what?
I'll start, and perhaps Zoning Administrator Matt Tucker would have follow-up thoughts. I believe my recommendation for where the condition would be housed would be in the landscape section of the zoning text. And at this point, I would, I could propose some more specific language as far as to the question of the enforceability. Again, we were waiting, no development would move forward until there's a specific implementation plan. And I believe we could structure the condition to note that the general development plan, that if it gets approved by the Common Council, shows the boundary of the proposed, the new boundary of the development area, and then of course the corresponding landscape area. And then I think modifications to that buffer, I believe, would be considered a second modification to the general development plan. So I could perhaps throw out just a little bit of language that I would suggest. I would say the zoning text shall be revised for staff approval and include the following in the landscape section: the revised general development plan approved by the Common Council includes the extent of the revised development area and landscape buffer along Watts Road. The existing trees and vegetation within this landscape buffer shall not be removed to accommodate future SIP proposals, and further modifications to the boundaries of this landscape area shall require approval of an alteration to this GDP. I think that's getting at the intent of the motion, but I guess I would leave it to the body to comment on that language.
That sounds good to me, but maybe Mr. Cantrell has a thought, or others.
Mr. Cantrell, did you? Okay.
It sounds good to me too. Thanks.
Okay, thank you. Alder McKinney, did you have something you wanted to add?
Well, I heard the wordsmithing, and I was specifically listening for the commissioner's concern about the trees. And I know that you are wordsmithing as on the fly, but I want to make sure that there is specific language without any doubt that we are preserving as many of those landscaping trees as the commissioner indicated. And so as long as that language, and sometimes the people around the room now understand the language, but when it gets passed on, it gets diluted. And so I want to make sure staff is very specific in terms of that language carrying through, so it ends up before the council and they're voting collaboratively in terms of what we're looking for and the preservation of the trees. And so that was just my observation.
Thank you, Alder.
It's appropriate. I could revise and add a clause for the consideration of the body. And I would revise the text that I previously stated and just state to the Alder's comment that the zoning text shall be revised for staff approval and include the following in the landscape section for the intent of preserving as many of mature trees as possible. And then I would continue on with the language that I previously noted.
Okay. Any comments on the motion along with the amendment as articulated by Mr. Firch? Seeing none, again, I will assume unanimous consent unless I see a hand raised to object. Okay, thank you very much. We will move on then to agenda items 5 and 6. These agenda items are related and are to be considered together. Agenda item 5, Legistar 59133, creating section 28.022 through 00419 of the Madison General Ordinances to change the zoning of property located at 935 West Johnson Street, 8th Alder District, from TRU2, Traditional Residential Urban District 2, to Campus Institutional District. And also agenda item 6, Legistar 59810, located at 935 West Johnson Street, 8th Alder District, consideration of a demolition permit to demolish a single-family residence to accommodate a future University of Wisconsin-Madison academic building. And we do not have a presentation by staff. We heard about this at our last meeting. So I will open the public hearing, and we do have registrants. Gary Brown, 30 North Mill Street, Madison, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak, and he is representing UW-Madison. So could we get Mr. Brown? Could you please unmute his mic? Thank you. Mr. Brown, you're on.
Great. Thank you so much, Madam Chair. I just wanted to take a couple minutes to thank Heather Bailey for her research on the historic ownership of the house. She actually confirmed my own research that I was doing at the same time. And the understanding that many multiple families have owned this house over the many decades, specifically the Mellor and the Meyer families. Mellor family and Sandra Meyer, their daughter, did own the property for many, many years. And that's who we purchased the property from just last fall. Our intent, as I mentioned back in early March, is to redevelop the entire block sometime, hopefully, in the next 5 to 6 years as we work on our capital budget and our projects coming through our capital budget review process. We do continue to purchase land in the block and to allow that development to happen. As noted back on March 9th, we do own several parcels already in the block, and we are going to maintain and continue to lease out those properties for student housing or whomever may wish to lease those rental units. And we're continuing to maintain those properties as we move forward until such time we'll be submitting a demolition request for those as well. I would note that this particular property at 935 West Johnson has...
Mr. Brown,
yes.
Can you speak up a little bit? I don't know whether anybody else is, but I'm having some difficulty hearing you.
Sure, no problem. Is that better?
Yes.
Okay. I just wasn't facing my computer. So again, it is our intent to continue to purchase property in this block, but we will be maintaining the houses that are maintainable and continue to lease those out in the future. This particular property at 935 West Johnson has been vacant and was vacant for many years prior to our acquisition. And unfortunately, the prior owners did not maintain the property and results in its current condition. And we are asking tonight for approval to demolish the property. In addition to Mrs. Bailey's research, we did submit some detailed photo documentation of the building inside and out. Just wanted to call that to your attention. And I would also note that we've submitted this property to the Wisconsin Historic Society for secondary review. They did review it previously and indicated at that previous time that the building was not eligible for listing on the National Register of Historic Places. I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Are there any questions of the registrant? Seeing none, thank you, Mr. Brown. We have a second registrant, Aaron Williams, 30 North Mill Street, Madison, Wisconsin, in support, not wishing to speak, representing UW-Madison. And I do not see any other registrants. Ms. Stouter? Are there any other registrants? No, there are not. Okay, then I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Rui.
Thank you. I'd like to talk to Heather Bailey. She did a really great job on the report, and I'd like to ask her a couple questions.
Ms. Bailey, could you raise your hand so I can find you? Okay, Ms. Bailey, thank you.
You're welcome.
First of all, the first paragraph, you refer to Daniel Mackman, and I know in the 1850 census, there was no Daniel Mackman, but there was a Daniel Whackman. So that sort of lingered in the report, but the rest of the report is really great. And I had a question right at the end, especially in regards to how we're looking at how we preserve buildings in the new write-up that has been done. On the last paragraph, the Landmarks Commission would also take into account the condition of the building as part of this historic review. Has the Landmark Commission looked at this since you wrote this report?
No, the Landmarks Commission has not had any meetings since the beginning of March.
So based on your report, I would think that we would want, because you did such a great job reporting this, that the Landmarks Commission would want to review this before we make a final decision. Would that be correct?
I am here, I suppose, available for questions. If that is the will of the body, then that is certainly something the Landmarks Commission can do. They are having an emergency meeting on May 4th. But I don't know if they would provide additional insight and information in addition to the report that I have supplied to the Plan Commission.
But they did not see this report, did they?
That is correct.
So I would think, because of the great work you did, that you would like to present that to them and get their final opinion before we make our decision.
I'm happy for the report that I provided for anybody to be able to use that as you see fit.
Okay, thanks. I really appreciate your report. It was a great job. Especially you emphasize the women business part of it, among other things. So great job. Thank you.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions? Yes. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. There's a follow-up question for Ms. Bailey. I think when I read that last paragraph in that last sentence, I see it as if there were a proposal to landmark the building, then the Landmarks Commission would take into account the condition. Is that a fair reading of what you wrote?
I think that is a fair reading of what I wrote.
Thank you. I just want to make sure people understand what this means. Like it wouldn't just go back and they would say a review of the property. It would only be if somebody had done the work of bringing forth a proposal. Thank you.
Did you have anything else, Alder Rummel?
I'm still getting the hang of not raising my hand anymore, which I did.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of staff? Okay, then I would be looking for a motion. Commissioner Rui.
Thank you. I move that we refer this to the first meeting in May so that the Landmarks Commission can look at the report that that Ms. Bailey had completed only last week.
Do I have a second? Commissioner Cantrell.
No, I raised my hand to make the motion.
Oh, okay. Thank you. Do I have a second of Commissioner Rui's motion? Seeing none, motion. Alder Rummel.
I would second for purposes of discussion.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Commissioner Rui, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Oops. Am I on?
Yes.
Okay. I just think that it's sort of like when we work on protecting trees that have been here for 100 years. This house has been here for over 130 years, a lot more than that. And I would think that we should give it a little more time to think about it before we destroy it and there's nothing to be recovered. Time isn't the essence on this one. The building's not going to be built. The university's not going to work on it for another 6 years. They have no plan. I think we should take our time and contemplate this for another month. And then if they want to, they can tear it down or move it at that point. But I think we should not be rushing into making a decision on this, especially the report that Ms. Bailey did was only written on April 9th. And the Landmarks Commission has not had a chance to even look at it yet. So I just think we deserve the Landmarks Commission the opportunity.
Thank you, Commissioner Rui. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I seconded this. You know, I don't know that it will have support, but I think the underlying premise of Mr. Rui's statement is the key one, and that is, what is the rush to tear down this building? I honestly, having served on Landmarks for 6 years, and I don't want to assume I know the future because I certainly don't. But I would, if I were the Landmarks Commissioner still, I would read this great report and say, wow, it's really an important part of our broad cultural history. And it'd be really great if you could save it. And they'll come back with, I just think they'll affirm generally the report, you know, like, and not really tell us anything we don't know now. And so the question is, knowing what we do know, you know, it's got some condition issues. It's a Civil War era building. Is it worth not going right away and saying it's okay to demolish? You know, and I think that's the question. We know then there's maintenance costs and for the university and there's all those other questions. But personally, I would support waiting because, you know, once that thing is gone, it's gone forever. And you know, moving it was a big question mark. And so, you know, could there be a way to incorporate something? You know, they'll tell us no, but I think those questions at least should be given a chance to get unpacked. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I would just recommend that we not delay this. It's unfortunate that this building is in a condition that it's in and a location that it's in, but I don't see it delaying it is going to be solving any issue here. One of the conditions that planning staff has included in the report is to delay the demolition for at least another 60 days after the approval. And if the commission members wants to lengthen that to 90 days, that's fine. I think we should obviously forward the report that Ms. Bailey submitted to the Landmarks Committee and let them commission and let them review it. But again, I see no reason to delay this demolition, this approval at this point in time.
Thank you, Commissioner. Did you have more, Commissioner Cantrell?
No.
Thank you. Are there any other comments on the motion? Seeing none, I will assume a unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Okay, there is a raised hand. So I will unmute everyone and ask for a roll call vote. Secretary Stouter, could you please do a roll call vote?
Alder Lemmer.
Aye.
Commissioner Rui.
Aye.
Alder Heck.
Aye.
Commissioner Spencer.
Aye.
Commissioner Cantrell.
No.
Commissioner Hagenow.
No.
Alder Rummel.
Aye.
Commissioner Burnett.
Aye.
Commissioner Sundquist.
No.
Okay. Sounds like the ayes have it.
The ayes have it. This will go to the Landmarks Commission, and we'll come back then after the Landmarks Commission has had an opportunity to review this.
And is that then a formal referral to Landmarks? Is that how we should track this?
That's the way I understood Commissioner Rui. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
What was the count on the vote?
Let's see.
You had Secretary Stouter. What was the count on the vote?
Just kidding. I believe, hang on just a second. Six to 2. Were there 3? Sorry. I got Cantrell, Hagenow, Sundquist. Yep, there were 3. Sorry. 5 to 3.
Thank you. Okay, so that will be referred to Landmarks then, and will come back to us then after Landmarks takes a look. Okay, then moving on to agenda item 8, Legistar 59635, creating section 28.022 through 00429 of the Madison General Ordinances to amend a planned development district at properties located at 8110 through 8134 Midtown Road and 1833 through 1859 Waldorf Boulevard, First Alder District, to approve an amended general development plan and creating section 28.022 through 00430 to amend a planned development district to approve a specific implementation plan. And I believe that we have a presentation by Mr. Wells. You're on, Mr. Wells. Good evening. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Plan Commission. The proposal before you this evening includes a request for 2 plan development zone amendments to modify the general development plan and create a specific implementation plan. Construction of 3 multifamily apartment buildings at 8110 to 8134 Midtown Road, 1833 to 1859 Waldorf Boulevard, 8137 Mayo Drive, and 1902 Carnes Drive. The proposal is subject to the standards for zoning map amendments, MGO section 28.182 parent 6, and plan developments, MGO section 28.098.
This application includes several key modifications to the existing GDP. These include construction of 3 much larger buildings instead of 5 smaller buildings on the subject parcels. 2, removal of the requirement to include roughly 100,000 square feet of ground floor commercial development. 3, increase in the building height limits on the subject parcels from 4 to 6 stories. And 4, increase in the number of dwelling units from 186 to 276 dwelling units. Staff's primary concern relates to the plan consistency and whether Plan Development Standard 2B regarding facilitating the development goals of adopted plans is met. While the overall density is consistent with the adopted land use plan recommendations for density, staff believes that the lack of proposed commercial spaces along Waldorf Boulevard from a land use perspective represents an important policy discussion. Over the years, several approvals have reduced the amount of commercial development in this corridor, which was originally intended to be a neighborhood serving Main Street. In comparison, staff believes that the applicant's original proposal, which included a roughly 4,000 square foot commercial component in the building proposed for the southwest corner of the site, Building B in the plans, staff believe that to be more consistent with the adopted plan's neighborhood mixed-use recommendations. Other plan consistency questions relate to the proposed building heights, given that they are up to 6 stories in certain areas, exceeding the 4 and 5 story heights recommended in the neighborhood and comprehensive plan, respectively. While staff recognized that the additional stories are due in part to the drops in grade, staff note that in comparison, the other 2 existing buildings on the block indeed step down with the grade to maintain the 4-story height. Furthermore, given the large amount of blank facade area of the proposed buildings, particularly along Waldorf Boulevard, staff have also noted concerns regarding planned development standard 2E, which pertains to developments creating an environment of sustained aesthetic desirability compatible with the existing or intended character of the area and the statement of purpose for the planned development district. Staff notes that the Urban Design Commission made an advisory recommendation of final approval subject to the listed conditions. As such, staff believes that this proposal is consistent with some, but not all, recommendations in adopted plans. If the Plan Commission finds that the proposal meets the approval standards, it should forward zoning map amendment ID 28.022-00429, approving an amended plan development, general development plan, and zoning map amendment ID section 28.022-00430, approving a plan development specific implementation plan for the subject site. They should approve it subject to the GDP and the SIP for the subject parcels to the Common Council with a recommendation of approval. This recommendation is subject to input at this public hearing and conditions recommended by reviewing agencies. In the alternative, should the Plan Commission not find that the proposal meets the applicable standards, including Plan Development Standard 28.098, Parent 2, Parent B, the Plan Commission should recommend that these items be placed should be placed on file. The Commission should provide findings of fact listing the standards that have not been met and the reasons such standards were not met as part of their recommendation to the Common Council. Finally, I would note that the Alder for the district, Alder Harrington McKinney, is on the call, and I would be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wells. I will open the public hearing. We do have several registrants on this item. The first one I have is Venkat Rao, 8145 Midtown Road, Madison, Wisconsin, in opposition and wishing to speak. Could we get Mr.
Chair, he has asked me to share my desktop as I have the slides for his presentation.
Okay.
Or can you say the name again?
It's Venkat, and the last name is Rao.
Bear with me 1 minute, please. Sorry, let me just try this one more time. Two monitors trying to get set up. I apologize. Okay, 1 second. Okay.
Okay. If we could have Venkat Rao then speak to these.
Madam Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Madam Chair and members of the commission, thank you for letting me speak. I live just across the road from Midtown, from the proposal on Midtown Road. We've lived here for 38 years. We live in a house which was built in 1913. So I thought I'll give you some context and use some Google Maps to show you the proposal. Right in the middle of the slide now, you see the open area, which is where the proposed buildings would be. Just in the bottom of the screen, right in the middle, is where we live. And further to the right is the Marty Farm. What I wanted to show in this slide is Midtown Road has mainly single-family homes from the junction of High Point Road to the middle of to County M Junction. Next slide, please. This is a bit of a more close-up. You can see in the bottom of the picture our house again and the open land that where the proposed buildings will be. Next slide, please. This is a three-dimensional view of Midtown Road. Again, I want to emphasize that almost all the houses except the other two buildings owned by the same developer are all single-family homes. And you can see there's a lot of open land, which is the Marty Farm and also the farm that we live on. Next slide, please. Here's the house that we live in, built in 1913. The farm in the the barn that we have in the background was built in 1916. And further up the road, next slide, please, is the Marty Farm. And you can see there's farm machinery. It's a real farm with corn and hay being grown. So my concerns about the proposal are as follows. Number one, what is being proposed is 276 apartments. Everybody would acknowledge that's a lot of apartments with 372 parking spots. So there's going to be at least a minimum of 370 cars added to Midtown Road. The 276 apartments add to probably existing apartments by my count of 275 before, brings it up to a total of 550 apartments. So the buildings are massive. What is in my view, is objectionable is the size of the buildings. A 6-story building on Midtown Road, which is primarily single family dwellings, seems
Madam Chair, that's the 3 minutes.
Okay, I'll finish up. The second objection that I have is the lack of commercial.
So if you can finish up in just a sentence or two, please.
Yeah, the second issue is the lack of commercial space, and the third issue is adding 370 cars to Midtown Road. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Our next registrant is Alex Padnos in support and wishing to speak. He lives at 7036 Walnut Road, Eau Claire, Wisconsin. And he indicates he's not representing any organization. Mr. Padnos, you are up.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hey, my name is Alex Paternos. I work for JCAP Real Estate and Development. I know we're limited on time here, so I will make this brief and then move on to the rest of our team. We're a family-owned real estate and development company. We've been around for 30 years. We pride ourselves in creating quality, economically feasible properties all over the Midwest. We're really excited about being on this far west side part of town with Epic and Exact Sciences expanding at the rate they are. And we were extremely happy to be passed with a unanimous vote through the UDC meeting a couple weeks back here. And with that, I will pass things along to Rick Westling at Urban Works Architecture.
Just a minute, please. So you are representing the applicant?
Yes, I work at JCAP Real Estate. We're the developer.
Oh, okay. The information I had did not have you representing anybody. And then who did you wish to pass this along to?
Rick Westling. With
okay, that's good. So he's Urban Works Architecture out of Minneapolis, and he is in support and wishing to speak. Go ahead, Mr. Westling.
Good evening, commissioners. Thank you. Thank you for your time. Before we go through the presentation, I understand that we're asking for an amendment to the PD for this Midtown Common Center, and there's a lot to consider. This site had a PD approved back in 2007. I'd like to talk about that a little bit more later. And more recently, the neighborhood development plan was amended in 2017, and of course the comp plan in 2018. Next slide. As you can see, the site, I'm sure you all know, you've studied your packet, that the site is just one block east of South Pleasant View Road, which is kind of considered a neighborhood hub. Next slide, please. It is zoned, you can see the star there, green. The neighborhood development plan calls this out as probably the center of the neighborhood development. Half our site is in mixed use neighborhood, and the other half is in housing mix 4. The 4 existing, the 4 hatched buildings on there, the 4 boxes, are residential only buildings, and they're all within the neighborhood mixed use. The other buildings that are shown in yellow, one's the veterinary clinic on Waldorf in Midtown. The other building is a mixed use building with residential above, retail on the bottom floor. This subdivision is also one of the first subdivisions in the city that is focusing on a new urbanist design principles, specifically relatively high density, focus on a pedestrian experience, it's human scaled, eyes on the street for safety, creating strong street edges, and concealing the parking from the street. Finally here, it also has a transit line going right by it. It is a commuter line right now. Hopefully with the increased density, the rate will increase on the transit. Next slide, please. The plan that was approved in 2007 did have 5 different buildings on them, 5 smaller buildings. The challenge, one of the things that we wanted to address in the design that we forwarded was the lack of green space. This plan is, for all intents and purposes, almost all parking lot or infiltration basins. The other thing was the new urbanist approach of creating strong street lines. The 2 corners on Midtown of Carnes and Waldorf both have large green spaces there, weakening the streetscape.
Madam Chair, that's the time.
Okay, thank you. Can you wrap up, please, Mr. Wessling, in a sentence or two?
I think their major point is that we've tried to scale this building to the neighborhood and move it in the direction of the amended plans that are going on in this area. That's fine.
Thank you. Thank you very much. The next registrant is Katie Hughes, 901 North 3rd Street, Minneapolis, in support, wishing to speak, and also representing Urban Works Architecture. Ms. Hughes?
Hi. Thank you to Chris for operating the slides. Do you mind moving forward a few slides just to catch up? We can keep going. A couple more. This is good. So I'll just start off kind of looking at what the existing multifamily buildings are in the area. I know we did have one member of the community that lives to the south of Midtown Road, but just taking a look at how we are zoned for the mixed use and also housing mix 4 and the scale of the buildings in terms of plan, we're, as Chris said, meeting the density that is allowed in that area, as well as kind of meeting what that street frontage is. If we could go to the next slide, please. Taking a look at some of that surrounding context, how they treat balconies, articulated facades, and the material palettes. If we move to the next slide, as you might have noticed, we have a significant amount of grade change as mentioned on this project. So we are just shy of 40 feet moving from west to east along Midtown and then moving towards the north just over 30. So we have about 4 stories, 3 to 4 stories in both the east-west as well as north-south direction that we're managing throughout these projects. If we can move along to the next slide, and we can skip this one as well. And I'm just going to move through these landscapes pretty quick. We're just showing that we're trying to locate the landscaping where the pedestrian environment is met. And at times we have, as opposed to retaining walls, kind of trying to manage that with raised planters and having a terracing effect throughout the site. If we move to the next slide, please, we'll show the material palette that we're proposing, having higher quality materials towards that corner, predominantly consisting of brick and fiber cement, but also stepping down as we move towards Midtown and those single family homes with these liner units that are only 2-story in gesture, and also using the materials to step throughout the building design towards that. So if we keep moving along, we'll just see some images. This is looking south at building A, where we're meeting the context to the left-hand side of the image. If we move to the next slide, you can see that same building in the background, and towards the right side of the image, how significant that slope is. If we move to the next slide, just showing some additional imagery of that improved streetscape. And if we keep going through these slides, just really showing where those terraced planters are, how we're trying to cover up some of those walls with green walls and really giving lush landscaping. If we continue and having landscaping towards that bus stop and working our way through those liner units back up the hill along Midtown. If we keep moving along, we have additional greenscape, trying to tie that pedestrian activity through to the interior of the site with those stairs, but also having right in, right out for traffic control for access into those parking garages. We keep moving. we can see how the landscape, how the building is stepping down along with the grade. And then also again in the background, how we're meeting that 4 stories of context. This building C is the 6 stories that keeps being referred to. And we recently did an average grade plane study, which showed that we are actually 4 stories within that context. But if we keep moving along in these slides, kind of showing in the foreground on the left and the right hand side of the image, where we're hitting that existing context and moving through. So if we keep moving through these slides, just showing the interior connectivity, next slide.
Sorry, that's the time.
Okay, and just kind of how we're trying to have a cohesive, and if we can just move forward a few more slides.
And can you wrap up in a sentence or two, please?
This is my wrap up, just to show how we're meeting the context of the neighborhood. On an exterior facing elevations, we're at that height, and so we're trying to have a contextual response while maintaining that density. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Hughes. Our next registrant is James Stoppel, 1202 Regent Street, Madison, in support and wishing to speak, not representing another entity.
I do not see anybody by that name.
Okay. Then we will not hear from Mr. Stoppel, I guess.
It might be showing up as Jim.
Do you see someone as Jim Stoppel?
No, there's no one by, there is just a Jim. That is not the name that they registered under.
Okay. If he appears, we will bring him in if we are not beyond the time to do that. I have 2 more registrants, Justin Zampardi, 999 Fourier Drive, Madison, available to answer questions, representing JCAP Real Estate, and Suzanne Vincent, also of Fourier Drive, not wishing to speak, representing Veerbecker. Are there questions of any of our registrants? Questions of any of our registrants? Yes. Commissioner Cantrell.
I had a question about, you submitted an earlier plan which showed commercial along Waldorf Street, and then you've submitted this one. I guess I'm curious, the previous plan, as staff indicated in the report, is much more consistent with the neighborhood plan concept that we approved just a couple years ago than this one. So why did you withdraw that one and submit this one?
Would be Mr. Wessling be the one to answer that?
Raise my hand.
I'll ask our technical staff if they see a hand raised for that.
Attendees are not able to raise their hand, but we have unmuted Mr. Wessling.
Thank you. Mr. Wessling, can you answer that question or let us know who of your team would be appropriate?
Yes, Jim Stoppel was going to speak to the retail component of the project. The reason we removed it is when we reached out to various potential tenants, we came up with nothing. And the fear of having a empty retail space would actually be a drag on the neighborhood, which is consistent with the feedback that we received at our neighborhood meeting. The neighborhood folks did not want to have empty retail on their site. The other challenge with retail that we don't think we fully were able to address is Waldorf slopes at a slope of approximately 6 to 8%. There would be no accessible parking available on Waldorf for retail along Waldorf. We were able to have 5 spots close to the retail where it was proposed. But given that we had absolutely no interest from potential tenants in this space, we felt it better to remove it versus have it create a drag on the project. Rarely, retail is rarely underwritten by the project financiers, and what happens is the rest of the project ends up carrying the weight of the construction of retail space. So that was a further reason that we decided to remove retail from the proposal. I hope that answers your question.
Did you have any further questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, thank you.
Commissioner Heck.
Thank you. I'd like to ask Mr. Wessling, maybe, I assume it might be for him, a question about the neighborhood engagement process that you mentioned. You indicate that neighbors, and in your application too, that neighbors were generally not in favor of having more commercial space in fear of it being empty. Can you talk about who you spoke to, how many people, and what the engagement process was?
Yes, I can. I can speak to, I do not remember the date of the meeting, but there was a pretty good crowd for a neighborhood meeting. I thought there was 20, maybe 30 people there. We went through the project much as we did tonight, and we discussed the retail, and the neighborhood group brought up the issue of the fact that the retail along Mayo Drive west of Waldorf is in fact not as full as it can be, and they don't like to look at dirty windows and paper over the windows. We intended to create some Class A retail space, some nice tall ceiling space versus the retail that's along Mayo, which is 9-foot space, and destination versus traffic-based retail. But with lack of interest, it just couldn't be supported by the project. The issue of no empty retail in the area was brought up at the neighborhood meeting by the residents.
Thank you. Just one more question. And was your search for potential tenants in the previous iteration through commercial real estate brokers or through your company, or how did that process work?
Madison Property Management reached out to several potential tenants, multiple potential tenants, in fact, and they did not come up with anybody who responded positively, even with any interest.
Okay, thank you.
Alder Harrington McKinney.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Let me add some context to the meeting. Was Thursday, November the 21st, was the neighborhood meeting. And we sent out 1,300 invites in the area because we wanted to have wide input from residents. And that night of the meeting, 21 residents did come. There was a very, very robust conversation. And I need to correct the speaker about the no interest related to the retail space. And I have the notes, and I will make sure that that's a part of the record. What the residents said is that they did not want retail space that was empty space, but they wanted retail that would do well. The suggestions they made were high-end restaurants, a coffee shop, high-end retail, And so they were interested because that area is zoned mixed use, and there is nothing that is actively there in that space. And so the residents did want something there. When the speaker said that there was no interest, I would challenge that because there was an interest, but they wanted to make sure that there were businesses in that retail commercial space that would be successful.
Thank you, Alder. Did you have anything else to add?
Yes, I would refer back to the staff.
Madam Chair, I'm seeing that there is one more registrant on this item.
Okay.
She was added late.
Okay.
Her name is Susan Millar at 2233 Rowley Avenue in Madison.
Okay, and she wished to speak, Ms. Stouter?
Correct, speaking in opposition.
Okay. And do we have her, that we can add her to the?
We do not have anyone by that name.
Okay, I'm being told, Ms. Stouter, by our technical folks that they don't have her in the queue.
Okay.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Sundquist.
I do not have a question for the, I don't have a question for the registrants. They've been asked, but the Susan Millar was the person who was emailing me. She was frustrated she could not get in. So this is just some kind of FYI for folks working this. She had trouble ever getting the system to work, and she ended up giving up. She was the person you just called, but she did write something, and Heather just emailed that around. So if you check your email, you'll see what Susan was trying to get through.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Any other question? Okay. Commissioner Burnett, do you have question of the applicants? I mean, the registrants.
I have a question of Alder Harrington McKinney.
Okay, well, ask me and we'll get an answer.
Ask you?
Please go ahead with your question.
Yeah, I had some connection issues. I'm just wondering overall if the Alder is in support of this development. I had connection issues when she was speaking.
Alder Harrington McKinney, could you speak to your support or lack thereof of the project?
Thank you. I wanted to make sure that it was placed in the correct order. I do have some comments about the robust neighborhood meeting that was held on November the 21st. And then I wanted to bring in, I have the same concerns as staff has indicated, and I wanted to clarify some things with the staff before I spoke. But
okay, you're right. That would come later then. So we will close the public hearing and do the staff questions, and then we will come back to you, Alder.
I do have a question. The commissioner said that there was a registrant that was not able to get in but wrote something. Could you share what that was, because I'm not able to see that? Is that in order?
Yes, I think that would be. Ms. Stouter, would you be able to share that, please, with the commissioners?
Certainly, with the Alder. Yep.
Thank you. Okay, are there any other questions of the registrants? Seeing none, are there questions? I will close the public hearing and we will move to questions of staff. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, thanks. And want to commend staff for doing a really thorough job of looking at the issues that were raised here and the compatibility with plans and so forth. So I have some, when we come to discussion, I have some views to share there, but the one, and I apologize if I'm missing it because I'm flipping back and forth and trying to watch people on the screen. We're all getting new at this. But Chris Wells mentioned the issue of the sort of blank wall, and I've lost track of which building that is. If he could speak to that a little bit more and what might be the suggestion and how to handle that. It's already been to UDC. They're typically who we would have look at questions about blank walls and so forth, but maybe they're more attuned to the articulation of the bricks and they've missed this big planning thing. But so I'm just trying to figure out how to handle that one.
And did you have a staff person that you were directing this to?
Yeah, well, Mr. Wells made the presentation, so I would, I guess, unless it's somebody else.
Mr. Wells.
Yes, at the top of page 9 of the staff report, I put together a diagram indicating some of the areas of concern. And I think of note, the image there is of building B, which is the one further down the slope of Waldorf Boulevard at the intersection of Midtown and Waldorf. They are proposing a green screen that would, over time have vines or ivy or some kind of green area. That's roughly 2.5 times the height of a person, but there's a lot of area of the building that is adjacent to the public sidewalk, but is an empty facade. And they had presented this to the Urban Design Commission, and there were several conditions and issues that were brought up by the Urban Design Commission as part of their recommendation of approval, that they wanted that resolved. I don't think they were completely happy with how that was proposed. And so it was left up to the applicant to work on that and then have that discussed with staff moving forward. So I think it's the amount of area of the building along this, as well as the building to the north, building A, that for a development that is intended to be very pedestrian oriented, staff had concerns that there was this much amount of blank facade area in their proposals.
Yeah, thank you. I see that now. And building B is the same building that staff felt was like the most important retail location as well, right?
Well, the commercial was planned in the general development plan for basically the entire perimeter of this entire parcel, but specifically the applicant had originally proposed a commercial, a 4,000 square foot commercial area at on the left side of this elevation that I'm showing. So it was going to be in between building A and building B. and that is where they proposed that it was going to be located.
Okay, so the location with this blank screen, the blank facade, is not necessarily where the if we held them to putting in retail, it wouldn't necessarily solve the problem of this blank screen, I guess. Wouldn't be a 2-for-1 fix, right? That there's separate questions.
That's correct.
Okay. Thank you.
Does that complete your questions, Commissioner?
I think so. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. This question is for Mr. Wells too, I believe. I'm interested in the properties on the other side of the road where the farmland where Mr. Rao lives and where the larger farm is. And I've looked at the High Point Raymond neighborhood development plan, and it looks to me like the farmland that's directly across the street across Midtown is slated in the future land use map as housing mix 3 and housing mix 4. Is that correct as far as you know?
I'm reviewing the plan.
My point is that the farmland is thought to be developable land in the future too, correct?
That is correct. Yes, it is indicated for mixed use type 4 or residential type 4.
And that's the same as the parcel that's to the eastern part of this proposal. Okay, thank you.
That concludes your questions? Okay. Alder Rummel.
Chair Zellers. My question is for Chris or any other staff person who feels like they have that kind of economic outlook. So we heard from the applicant that they tried and were concerned that they wouldn't be able to fill ground floor retail based on, some survey of Mr. Stoppel. Can you tell me, you mentioned, or somebody mentioned that there was a 2017 era review, maybe an update of this neighborhood plan. At any point, I guess I'm getting my question is, at any point, is we ever review these goals for mixed use as they go forward? And have, and also just in my own experience, they often build it and then it takes a while for somebody to show up. So I don't assume that changes, but anyway, through the more recent process, did we review how expectations are for mixed use in this area? Thank you.
I would defer to my colleagues. I'm not aware of the retail research with this project, or this plan rather.
Is there another staff person who wishes to speak to this? Mr. Parks.
Sure, I'll take a shot at it, and would also recommend that others weigh in. I see that Mr. Firch has his hand raised.
Right.
The neighborhood development plan was amended in 2017, and of course, many of the Plan Commission members will remember that most of the discussion regarding that amendment dealt with the extension of Jeffy Trail, but the recommendations for this block were reviewed as part of that neighborhood plan amendment, and changes were made to accommodate whereas previously all of the subject lots that are before you tonight were recommended for neighborhood mixed use. the amended plan shifted the ones on Carnes Drive to housing mix 3 or 4, and then left the potential for mixed use on the remainder of the block, and then also extended the mixed use further west, creating a larger mixed use area extending all the way to Pleasant View Road. So that was done with an eye towards continuing to create the center of the neighborhood that's been planned in the High Point Raymond neighborhood since its initial planning in 1997. As far as the mixed use for this area, really it has historically depended on the connection of Midtown Road to Raymond Road. That is shown in the plan. Very challenging connection to make to connect the planned Midtown arterial road to the existing Raymond Road arterial further east up a pretty significant slope. The city's expectation is that at some time in the future that connection can be made, and we feel that this entire mixed use area, including the subject site, would be viable for mixed use once there were more vehicle trips on Midtown Road. So you have a robust apartment market driving the desire for a predominantly or an entirely residential project, and an arterial street network that's not yet complete to support the planned non-residential components that we have long envisioned for the neighborhood. And I would look to or listen for my other colleagues and their perspectives on that. Thank you,
Mr. Parks. Mr. Firch.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. The point I was going to raise when I raised my hand was actually the one Tim mentioned about the connection of Midtown and Raymond Roads. Now, we don't, one point, some of our neighborhood plans, to Alder Rummel's original question, with some of our neighborhood plans and neighborhood development plans, there is a market study component. There wasn't one, I don't believe, done for this study. So to her original question about market study, there wasn't one that I'm aware of that was done for this proposal. I'm sorry, when that neighborhood plan was completed a couple years ago.
Thank you, Mr. Firch. Alder McKinney.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I was very excited. I've lost my screen. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yes, I can. Did you have questions of staff, or are you?
Yeah, let me ask the question of staff. And and whoever would want to pick this up, please pick it up. You made the comment that there has been a long envisionment of a more robust area with more vehicle use in that area with the connections. What are we talking about in terms of when that connection might be? Because when we're looking at that neighborhood plan, it always comes back to that connectivity with that Raymond Road. Where do you see that in the future?
Could whichever staff is going to respond, raise their hand, please. Mr. Parks.
I can speak to this a little bit only because I've been involved in some recent conversations about the connection. Only to say that we've planned for that connection of Midtown to Raymond Road, and it's been looked at at a very high level over the last 20 some years. My understanding right now is that the City Engineering Division will soon be putting forward requests for proposals for consultant services to study how that connection would be made. There's a lot of significant topography where that connection would occur, mostly through the existing Marty Farm. But my understanding is city engineering has prepared an RFP. It may even be out in the public right now, using money that was in this year's capital budget to look at how to make that connection. It may include, when that work is done, in 6 to 12 months, preliminary cost estimates. But that's the status of that right now. So we are studying it more closely than we have before. Thank you.
Okay. Another question specifically for the staff. We're talking about mixed use. And when you're defining mixed use for that area, what is in that area right now? If that development were to go without that commercial space, what would be the access to those 276 potential residents in that apartment complex? What's there now?
It looks like I'm lit back up again. And if any of my colleagues want to raise their hand, they certainly can.
Mr. Firch has raised his hand. Would you?
I can answer, and then, but I would also look to Kevin to backfill that.
Okay.
Right now, the access is as it currently exists. Midtown Road ending at Old South Gammon, and the connection to the west is actually greatly improved as of the work that was completed last fall with the Pleasant View Road project, which widened Midtown Road to an urban cross section all the way up to this project site at Waldorf. But the access for the entire development, everything that's there now, the units that we're talking about currently would be provided by the existing road network, which is Midtown connecting to the east to Gammon and to High Point, and to the west to Pleasant View, and to the town of Middleton further west of that. And if that doesn't answer the question, I'm happy to clarify.
What is the traffic, estimated traffic count on that road that you just mentioned? What's the traffic count there?
On Midtown Road, I don't know. We may have some projections in the 2017 plan. I would have to look up what the most recent annual daily trip counts are on Midtown Road.
So where the location of this proposed development is, and give me an estimate of the vehicle. You can't give me an estimate of that vehicle traffic along that right away?
I would probably, a project like this with this number of dwelling units might generate, somewhere on the line of maybe 1,200 to 1,600 vehicle trips a day, spread out over a 24-hour period. But I don't believe that I don't know if there is a traffic impact analysis for this project. I can tell you that the relative densities that are proposed here are consistent with what the neighborhood plan generally would have anticipated. And there was some analysis done through the neighborhood planning process to look at the additional development in the High Point Raymond neighborhood and the number of trips it would add throughout the neighborhood, including on roads such as Midtown.
And the added number of potential ridership, that's consistent with what's within the neighborhood plan? Would that be an overload, or would that is consistent with what's already in the neighborhood plan in terms of traffic?
I think I have a couple of colleagues who have their hands raised. I can defer to them. My impression is that densities such as those proposed here were anticipated through the neighborhood planning process, but I would
okay,
Kevin.
Mr. Wells. Thank you, Mr. Parks.
Yes, thank you. Traffic engineering did not recommend any specific traffic lights or additional infrastructure aside from extending the median on Midtown further to the west. So the underground parking entrance off of Midtown, which is located in between buildings B and C, that point would be right in westbound on Midtown Road.
Thank you, Mr. Wells.
So as the alder, I'm going to just go ahead and give my summary, and then I can would really like to hear what the commissioners are thinking, because they're more informed.
Alder McKinney, we had, he just unraised his hand. Wait, here.
See what's going on, so.
Yes, right. Mr. Firch had his hand raised, so he might want to add something here.
Thank you, Chair Zellers. Just very quickly, as far as that I was going to point to exactly what Chris Wells had pointed to, and that was the comments that were from the City Traffic Engineering Division. As far as just the overall process when a development like this moves forward, part of the review from the traffic engineer is to, one, determine if there's a need for a traffic study, and then two, to recommend conditions to mitigate perceived or potential negative impacts that they believe might result from a development such as this. So from planning staff, we would ask you to take a look at the comments as Chris summarized from the city traffic engineer in your staff report.
Thank you, Mr. Firch. Okay, and Alder McKinney, did you wish to speak now or in the discussion period? It's your call. Alder McKinney? Alder McKinney? I show you as unmuted, but you are showing up as muted. You will have to unmute your mic. Alder McKinney, did you wish to speak? I don't know whether our IT staff can unmute her. It looks like she's muted herself.
Correct. She's unmuted on our end.
Okay. Alder McKinney, if you wish to speak, you will have to unmute your mic. You're unmuted on our end.
Okay.
Okay, there seems to be a technical problem here. Alder McKinney, if you get your mic unmuted, please weigh in. Otherwise, I will be looking for a motion on item 8.
I had a question.
Who has a question?
Brad Cantrell.
Brad, your hand is not up, and I was not able to.
It's
okay.
It shows it up.
Yeah, it doesn't on my screen, so there's a problem there. Commissioner Cantrell, go ahead, please, with your question.
Sure. I had a follow-up question with that Commissioner Sundquist had about the green wall along Waldorf and the concern about that, and how is the green wall going to be working when most of at least in the winter and the many other months of the year, the green wall will be brown. So I guess I had my hand up some time ago, so I was going to ask the developer that question, but I'm assuming that if staff could answer it, that's fine.
Commissioner Cantrell, for some reason, your raised hand is not working and your mic mute and unmute is not working on my screen. So sorry about that technical problem. Also, your video is not on, so I can't even see if you want to like wave or anything to let me know about it. So you might want to try turning your video on if you can. But staff, can you answer Commissioner Cantrell's question? Mr. Wells.
Thank you. The point brought up is one that I know staff have had for quite some time of given the fact that it would take a while to grow, but also it would be seasonal.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner Cantrell?
I guess it would be interesting for the developer to weigh in on the green wall because they're the ones that are proposing it. But I'm also concerned about the blank wall of this project, especially with building B along Waldorf Drive.
We could reopen the public hearing to have the developer speak to that with the permission of the body. Seeing no objection, it looks like that's fine. I will reopen the public hearing and ask the developer to speak to the question raised by Commissioner Cantrell. I think that would probably be Mr. Wessling. Mr. Wessling, you're on.
Thank you, commissioners. Yes, I remember the discussion in the UDC a little bit differently than Chris presented it. We did have quite a bit of discussion about the blank wall along Waldorf and what would be an appropriate green wall to put on there. It is true that during the wintertime, all the leaves will be off the vines, but the UDC felt that that would be an interesting texture nonetheless on that wall and be good interest to break it up. I think it's important to note also that the UDC did invest quite a bit of time discussing this facade, and ultimately we received unanimous approval in terms of their vision of the architecture.
Did that answer your question, Commissioner Cantrell?
Well, I still have concerns about the blank wall along Waldorf, but I'm hoping that urban design can solve that, and also the amount of exposed concrete along the surfaces of some of these buildings as well, because I think that because it's at the sidewalk level, that doesn't make a very attractive project for this area. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay, Commissioner Cantrell, I am going to have to ask you, since neither your hand is showing up nor are you on video, that if you have a question or a comment, you are going to have to simply call out and let us know that, because we seem to have a technical problem with your link here.
If we could have you actually just exit the meeting and rejoin on that link again.
Okay.
We will give that a shot. We at least got you to speak.
Okay, so hopefully Commissioner Cantrell will be rejoining us as with a view and a hand. All Are there any other questions of Mr. Wessling while the public hearing is reopened? Seeing none, I will then reclose the public hearing. Are there any additional questions of staff? And as I look, I don't see Alder Harrington McKinney still linked to us, and I think she had something that she also wanted to say. So I am going to give this a minute to see if we are reconnected with either Alder Harrington McKinney or with Commissioner Cantrell. And I'm sorry for this this pause, but I think it's important if we can get either or both of those folks back with us. And I'll ask our tech facilitator if he could also check into Alder Harrington McKinney to see if we can get her back on. And to let us know if you're seeing anything with Commissioner Cantrell.
I currently haven't seen anything from them. I did resend them the links, so hopefully they were able to join. They'll be able to join as soon as possible.
Okay, I think we need to move on. Okay, hold on. We've got a couple people now in the queue. Alder Lemmer.
Hi, I see Alder McKinney in the attendees. Can she be unmuted?
She needs to put her hand up if she wishes to speak. I don't see her.
She would not be able to do that in the attendees. If she could rejoin by that link that I just sent in her email, she would have all of the restrictions taken away. She will be able to be a panelist again.
Yeah, I'm not seeing her in my list. Thank you, Alder Lemmer. Did you have anything else?
No, nope, that was it. Thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rummel.
Just while we're in this little chaotic moment, I have a note of personal privilege. If everyone saw the news that Judge Karofsky was declared a winner, I just noticed and I thought we would all want to know. Thank you. That's it.
Thank you, Alder Rummel. Okay, I think we need to move on. I am looking for a motion on this agenda item.
It looks like Commissioner Cantrell is joining.
Commissioner Sundquist.
So I would move to refer this for a month, and if I get a second, I can speak to the rationale.
Alder Rummel.
Not for referral. No, I had my hand up. Oh, no, I'm not seconding. I had my hand up for a different motion.
Okay. Okay. Do I have a second? Alder Lemmer.
Yeah, I'm seconding Commissioner Sundquist's motion.
Okay, thank you. And Commissioner Sundquist, do you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, please. I mean, I think there's just too much that's problematic with this to pass it now. If I had to vote it up or down, I would vote it down, and I would come up with. I think there's a lot in the staff report that we could go to, but there's some of it that is probably fine. I mean, going from 7 buildings to 4, We haven't really discussed maybe people will have issues with the height. I'm not sure that I do, given the elevations there. What really bothers me is the ditching of the commercial space. I think we've heard some comments from the Alder that there were also the neighborhood also wanted that commercial space, and it's just part of our plan. We have these greenfield areas. We can't make them into just housing only, and the current proposal wants to add even more housing and take out the commercial. It's out of whack. Yes, it's a burden to the developers in the short term to try to make all these things sync up. But you heard from staff that these things don't always happen in the, right at the same time. And that's why we do planning. So I think we need to, what I would hope to do is ask them to come back, and perhaps there's a chance to go to UDC and deal with this blank facade issue in the same time. For me, those are the two issues they have to resolve, is to get some level of commercial back into it. It may not be in every building the way it was to begin with, but some level, especially in building B, that the staff has called out as sort of the anchoring corner there, and which even if staff hadn't called it out, it is. Address this blank wall, and there may be other concerns that other commissioners might have in that interim too. So not usually a fan of referrals, but I just think that process-wise, with us being dispersed like this and having the conversation to try to get solutions for all of that and other things that folks might also have on their plate will be pretty hard in real time. So I would, again, just hope that the blank wall could go back to CDC. They could come up with something to address that. Maybe they won't, and then we'll just deal with it. And that the developer can think twice about removing all of the commercial.
Commissioner Sundquist, staff has suggested that we have the referral to the May 18th meeting. I didn't catch what you were looking at.
I said a month, but May 11th is going to be Edgewood, so yeah, that's probably wise to.
So May 18th?
Yes.
Okay. And with the thank you, Commissioner Sundquist. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. If I had gotten to the raised hand first, I would have moved to place this on file, because I really don't think it can be tweaked to get to a thing that I could support. But if people want to refer it, I think we have to send a strong message that, at least for me, the only way I could imagine allowing such a massive building if that it is all ground commercial. So unless they can imagine how that would work, I think they should revisit their building massing and placement. It does really not meet a lot of the general GDP, and I mean, there's just so many things that I'm not sure how a referral would come back without a different project, really. But so that's my thinking. Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Burnett.
I believe it was Commissioner Sundquist who made the motion. Is that correct?
I'm sorry?
Did Commissioner Sundquist make the motion to refer?
Yes, he did. To refer to May 18th.
I'm trying to understand the rationale for referring. What is the extra time supposed to do?
So you're concerned about the extra time. Okay, did you have anything to add that you would like to observe? No?
No, I'm wondering what's the rationale for referring, and what is anticipated to happen between now and then that will change everyone's mind.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Alder Heck.
Thank you. I'm going to support this motion because I think, first of all, we need to have Alder McKinney back in order to make her statement. Oh, maybe she's back. I see her video is back. So one of the reasons I was going to support the motion was because I thought it was important to hear from her again, and we were having technical difficulties. But the other reason is I have the same concerns as Commissioner Sundquist. I think because of the grade of the site, that the height is not necessarily a concern, but I do wonder if there's a way they can sneak some commercial back in there quickly in a 4 or 5 week period. Because they already had a design with commercial in it, they might be able to accommodate that. Perhaps not, but I'm willing to give them a chance. Thanks.
Thank you, Alder Heck. Let's see. Alder McKinney.
Am I unmuted? I think you did. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Two things. This is a good project for the district in terms of that end of my district. My concerns are not as major the concerns as the height. That was on my list as well. But the major sticking point for me is the lack of commercial development. That is huge for me. And in that segment, there is, and when we're talking about mixed use and we're talking about walkability and all of those things, there is nothing there. It's almost like a desert. And to have that beautiful building and the amenities, I was very, very excited with the robust community engagement. The neighbors really weighed in, and I'll make sure that I'll send their comments. And we came away very pleased with the project that did include a commercial level. And for a community to say, yes, this looks good, yes, we'll support it, and we really do want a commercial component at that lower level. And then for the developers to come back and say that they've totally taken that out concerns me. So I am supportive of them looking again, because having a building of just residential apartments just does not work for me. If there's any possibility to have some commercial development along that first level, then I would be 100% more supportive of it. I know that we will need to go back before the community because there's a lot of resident input that still needs to happen, but I really am supporting a commercial entity added back into that development plan.
Thank you, Alder McKinney. Commissioner Cantrell, glad to have you back again.
Yeah, thanks.
With a hand and a face.
Yes, that was a roundabout. But anyway, I'm supportive of the motion, but I think that we need to give the applicant and urban design some direction on this, because when I came to the meeting, I was thinking that this project should be placed on file, but I think that their original plan, which did show some commercial in Building B, should be revised and resubmitted, because I think that will solve some of the issues, one of the issues I have, because I think that we shouldn't just give up on commercial on this half block. I remember that when we adopted the new neighborhood plan in the area, we did propose some additional commercial to the farther west, but we didn't give up on some commercial within this block area. So I hope the developer would reconsider that. The other thing that I want the developer and urban design to look at again is the blank wall along Waldorf Boulevard, because that's very not pedestrian friendly at all. I think that it's just going to create a very unsightly building, and I think a lot of their building architecture is quite attractive. But the green wall, I think, needs to be revisited. I'm not sure how that's going to work. So those are the two major items, and staff flagged those for us to evaluate. And I think that they do need to bring back some commercial on this site, at least to get my support.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Rui.
I agree with the previous speakers on needing commercial. I live in a commercial desert. A lot of walkable sidewalks, but I have to walk 2 miles to get to anything. And I hate it. I don't want to see other neighborhoods go through this. We need commercial here. Even if it's only a coffee shop, it's better than anything. My concern also is about the blank wall, the green wall, make sure they work. And I'd also like to see the developer pay more attention to what the staff is talking to them about.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Hagenow.
I'm going to just kind of reiterate everything that previous commissioners have said. And the alder as well. I again was thinking that this item would be just placed on file. So I guess I'm reluctantly leaning towards going ahead and supporting this motion as it is right now. The developer really is going to have to take some time to tweak their plans, though, I think, and I'm not sure that a month is a long enough period. But I guess without being able to open up the public hearing and ask them themselves if that's enough time, we can just run with it. Thank you.
Well, and they could ask for more time. I mean, it doesn't have to be back on. So yeah.
All
okay.
Right.
Thank you. Anything else before we vote? Okay, the motion is
carried.
Yes.
As staff, I just wanted to add kind of along the lines of what Commissioner Hagenow was saying. We recognize that this may take longer than the 1 month or 5 weeks, especially given that the UDC is only meeting on a monthly basis right now. The applicant team would need to turn things around very, very quickly to get to the UDC on April 29th. And so I think it's still fair to refer this to May 18th because they do have that possibility. But practically speaking, this may get back to Plan Commission in June. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Ms. Stouter. Okay, so the motion is to refer to the Plan Commission of May 18th, although I'm going to assume a unanimous consent unless I see a hand raised. Okay, thank you. Motion passes. Moving on to agenda item 10, Legistar 59074. 3840 Maple Grove Drive, 7th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use for a multifamily dwelling with more than 8 units in the traditional residential urban 1 district, consideration of a conditional use residential building complex in TRU1 zoning, and consideration of a conditional use in the TRU1 district for accessory outdoor recreation to construct 8 townhouse buildings on a lot with 50 total units, an apartment block with 208 total units in 4 buildings, 3 apartment buildings on a lot with 24 total units, and a pool and clubhouse following recording of the Fred Maple Grove Drive plat. And we do have a presentation by Mr. Parks. Mr. Parks?
Yes, members of the Plan Commission, Madam Chair, the request before you is for a residential building complex on undeveloped land on the approved but not yet recorded Fred Maple Grove Drive subdivision that calls for various residential buildings with a common pool and clubhouse. Lot 1, which is bounded by Rockstream Drive on the north and also Chavez Elementary School, as well as Rockstream Drive on the west, Maple Grove on the east, and Manchester Drive on the south, will be developed with 8 two-story townhouse buildings containing 50 total units, as well as the complex's common pool and 1-story clubhouse amenities. South of Lot 1, along the Maple Grove Drive frontage, Lot 2 will be developed with 208 total units in 4 3-story buildings with underground parking and also a courtyard of parking between the 4 buildings. And finally, Lot 3 of the development, which will be west of Lot 2 across Fairhaven Road, will be developed with 3 2-story apartment buildings, which the applicant is referring to as a stacked flat, and that'll contain 24 total units. Again, the project calls for a total of 208 multifamily dwellings across the 3 sites. Staff has reviewed the project and believes that the conditional use standards can be met. The Urban Design Commission reviewed this project at its March 11th meeting and recommended approval subject to the conditions that are outlined both in the March 23rd staff report and as clarified in the addendum dated April 13th. The emphasis in the addendum addresses considerable discussion that the Urban Design Commission had regarding the applicant's proposal to use vinyl siding, which is somewhat rare but not completely out of the question for multifamily developments of this size. And so there was a clarification done between March 23rd and April 13th at the request of the applicant to better clarify the Urban Design Commission's action as it pertains to vinyl, and that is again noted in the addendum. So staff is recommending approval of the project as outlined in the March 23rd conditions of approval, except as modified in the addendum pertinent to condition number 5 related to the Urban Design Commission's review and recommendation on use of vinyl siding. And final approval by the Urban Design Commission will be required if the project is approved by the Plan Commission. I'd be happy to answer questions after the public hearing. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Parks. I will open the public hearing. We do have some registrants. The first one is Craig Raditz, 3620 West Normandy Court, Mequon, Wisconsin, in support and wishing to speak, showing that he is not representing any organization. Mr. Raditz, you are on.
Yes, good evening, Madam Chairman and Plan Commissioners. This is Craig Raditz. I'm actually the developer and a partner of Fiduciary Real Estate Development. So I just wanted to clarify that. I've been in front of you with our previous proposals. So
thank you for that clarification.
Great, thank you very much. And Mr. Parks did a great job of summarizing. I just noted tonight that it was April 10th, 2 years ago, that this parcel was annexed. It has been about a 3.5 year effort, and but we're very pleased just to bring it forward here tonight. Again, I think in all of my career and several of the projects we've done in downtown Madison and on the east side, we've never had such a dynamic assortment of housing options in one development. So we have from 525 square foot studios all the way to 1,700 square foot townhomes, 2-car garages. And as we've gone forward, we've worked so closely with staff because of the key park that's going to be adjacent to this, but even more importantly is the connection on Rock Stream going over Badger Mill Creek. And so all eyes have been on that and making sure that it's going to be improved from the status it's in now to a DNR Army Corps engineering type of standard. And the whole project has come together. We are very pleased. So we're hopefully in front of you to move forward on our conditional use. With me tonight also is Mark Ott of JLA Architects, and Mark also on most of the questions will be involved with any questions that you have. And then Paul Schmitter from our office is also available.
Thank you, Mr. Raditz. As Mr. Raditz mentioned, Mark Ott of 800 West Broadway, Monona, Wisconsin, is also registered in support but not wishing to speak, representing Fiduciary Real Estate Development. Also registered is Jennifer Camp, 3001 Midnight Sun Drive, Sun Prairie, in support, not wishing to speak, available to answer questions, not representing anyone other than herself. Paul Schmitter, 789 North Water Street, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, in support, not wishing to speak, indicating not representing anyone, but I think as Mr. Raditz mentioned, he is representing the developer. Joey Wisniewski, 2209 North Wells Street, Milwaukee, in support, not wishing to speak. Also indicating not representing anyone other than himself, although I'm thinking he might be representing the developer. Are there any questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Sundquist. Okay, Commissioner Sundquist.
Yes, sorry. Just wonder where the developer came out on the vinyl issue. If you there's a strong suggestion not to use it, and then a requirement to use stronger, shorter vinyl if it is used.
Mr. Raditz?
Yes, with regards to that, if Mark Ott, JLA is I was ill at that meeting, but there was a correction, as you mentioned, in the minutes. And if Mark Ott, who was...
Mr. Ott, could you answer the question, please?
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, so as mentioned, we've been in front of the UDC a couple times as their process. We've been there for UDC informational and initial, receiving approvals at both those levels. I think as Mr. Parks had mentioned and clarified some of the language, that we have been approved to use vinyl, but making sure that we use high quality vinyl. And as we've gone through with them, the architectural style of the buildings is very intentional. As we know, the couple of issues that can happen with vinyl, long lengths are not your friend when you're using vinyl. And of course, cheap vinyl is not your friend either. That's what most people associate with the problems. So our design is one, to use very high quality. We brought those samples to UDC and presented those, as well as the detailing of the building. So we're using, if you were to look at the packet and look at the architecture of the buildings, we have kind of lots of bumps and corners and ins and outs and window breaks to try to break up any long lengths of the vinyl. So keeping them into very short so you don't have those seams. So the style is very representative. It's very intentional for that reason. And then we're also using fiber cement or composite trim instead of the vinyl trim around windows and et cetera. So we're kind of doing a hybrid of it, if you will, and then using stone and masonry in other spots. So that's what we presented to UDC to this date. UDC at initial and informational, like I said, well, informational doesn't have a vote, but at initial, those have been approved, and it's just been noted in theirs that we maintain those high quality vinyl materials, and then their recommendation that we could go forward with those, recognizing that the Plan Commission has the opportunity to weigh in on that as well. So hopefully that summarizes it.
Thank you, Mr. Ott. Commissioner Sundquist, does that answer your question?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. Alder Rummel.
Hi. Hi, Mark. Tell me why vinyl, even if it's high quality, isn't just wrapping a building, at least where you propose it, in plastic, and the environmental friendliness of such a product.
Yeah, so as far as the environmental part has come a long way, obviously, in recent years. Actually, and we are, again, proposing to use higher quality vinyl, and the brand that we are proposing to use is actually more recyclable than is current fiber cement and composite sidings that are being put on. So they actually have an easier time recycling this right now than the process for that. So they have come a long way in some of that regards. As far as really what and Craig could probably speak a little bit more to this, but the logic behind this is, again, picking, what we've presented to UDC is we've shown them our detailing. We've shown them some examples where we've done this in other locations. And again, if you use the right high quality materials and design it right, it's really kind of hard to tell sometimes that the difference. But the other reason is, again, and I'll let Craig, if he wants to expand on this, talk about it, is the continual effort to really focus, and it's been in the news, it's been in your committee very often, I'm sure too, of affordable housing. And we're not talking about, tax credit type housing here, but we are very conscious on trying to keep the housing costs down, and, land costs what it costs, but where are other areas that we can try to control some costs, but yet deliver a high quality product, not skimping on some other areas. And vinyl versus fiber cement is one of those areas that we can help keep those costs down and not have to pass along to the end user. So that's kind of our logic behind why we chose it. And again, try to do that with good design and good selection of product.
I just would ask, you say it's easier to recycle, but you're not going to recycle it unless the lifespan of it is so short that you would be patching it, which I'm sure that's
right. No, that's not. But it's this good quality, and I don't have the document right in front of me, has a 30+ year life cycle to it, just as does fiber cement. So one of those questions come up now. 30 years from now, maybe they can recycle fiber cement a lot better. But no, the plan is not to. But if you're looking at literature and you're doing the research on the products, that's what we found, is that this product actually is more environmentally able to be recycled than is fiber cement if you were to have to, for some reason, take it off.
Thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Are there any other questions of any of the registrants? Alder Heck.
Thank you. This is probably for Mr. Ott, maybe Mr. Raditz. I have a couple of questions about parking. First, I see the two kind of townhome type buildings, S3 and S2, that are back to back. And I'm looking at sheet C102, but you can see it in other sheets too. I'm trying to understand why the entire area between those buildings is pavement. It looks like it's fairly wide, and I assume it's so people can back in and out of their garages, but it looks rather unpleasant. That's my first question.
Do you want me to answer that, or okay?
Yeah. Go ahead.
Yeah. So for that, so all those are stacked flats, what we call stacked flats. So they're, it's kind of like a townhouse, but a little bit different. So the width of that, again, is one of it's for turning movement. You do need a certain amount of distance, obviously, between those for turning movements. But we do have, obviously, every unit has has their own private parking garage, and they vary in size depending on the unit. Some have a single car, most have 2 car. But that really the additional area that is there is actually for guest parking. So you could actually, the width of that allows for cars to park essentially in front of, if you will, the garage door. And thus, is the purpose of that versus more street parking, if you will. So that's what's
unmarked spaces, essentially.
No, I mean, they're not striped off in terms of, striping. If you do see, obviously, between S3 and S1, for example, we do actually have some striped off parking stalls there. But again, it's those stalls, the width is designed to have enough for a car to queue behind the garage door and yet still have enough drive aisle for people to come and go and move outside of that. So that's the reason for the depth.
Okay, and that my second question then becomes even more interesting. I'm looking at the staff report on page 3 at the bottom, where it talks about the required number of automobile parking stalls and the proposed number of parking stalls on each of the 3 lots. And it looks like lot 1 and lot 3, and this one is lot 2. There's a lot of parking, and a lot more than what's required on lots 1 and 3. There's 100 stalls max required on lot 1, and it looks like 164 provided, and on lot 3 it's only 72, max of 48, and you've got a lot more than that. Are there reasons that you feel like you need so many parking stalls compared to what's required?
Yeah, and I can let Craig Raditz could speak to this too a little bit as a developer who's developed lots of units. But in general, for lot 1, for example, which is the townhouse site, so that one talks about max and mins. So if we look at that, lot 1 has 50 units, and each unit has a 2-car garage. So right there, just by by putting a 2-car garage, attached to every unit, we get already up to 100 parking stalls. And then of course you need, the anticipation is to accommodate some, some visitor parking. So again, obviously, especially in winter conditions, that if you have some visitors and you got snow conditions, you're not fully parking on the street. So that's an example of, and some of the same things happen with lot 2, as far as those numbers and ratios go, because it's a different product, but a very similar product. And then when you get to lot 3, that is apartment buildings, the standard conventional 3-story apartment building with underground parking. And so again, there, and this may be where Craig can jump in, they do a lot of analysis. They own many properties, and I'll let Craig here in a second, and their analysis of what they see is number of parking stalls to dwelling unit mix is kind of how we developed the numbers we came up with. Craig, do you want to weigh in on that?
Could you open up the mic for Mr. Raditz, please? Okay, Mr. Raditz, you're on.
Great, thank you very much, Mark. Yes, looking at the actual site plan, and this really is over the years, our firm kind of owns and manages through investors about 9,000 units throughout the state of Wisconsin and Minneapolis. And as we continue to look at these parking ratios, the primary reason is really the townhomes, and I don't like the word stack flats, I call them over-under units, because these will all be rentals as part of this community. But obviously the the need is the same, and such that we have our 50 townhomes. So right away by the 50 townhomes, like Mark pointed out, is you end up having 100 stalls immediately because they're all 2-car garages. And then just by the space behind the actual garage, when that's counted, it's almost like a double counted issue, is that you can park behind garages, and then you have your visitor space. The primary with these units is oftentimes these are more occupied by a couple or a family, and therefore we find a lot more cars that are associated with these units. Same with kind of the over-under units, that kind of idea. When we get to the 3-story over parking, we always look to have at least one in the basement, in the underground parking for every single unit, and then up on the surface to get about 0.5 or 0.6 for the surface stalls. One of the things you'll notice, and Manchester is going to be about a 44-foot wide road coming through here, and it's being designed to have parking along the street. So why I'm bringing that up is just that along the 3-story and then going south on the exit road. Let me just see here one moment. So going south along Fairhaven is the opportunity on both sides of the lot 2 to have on-street parking. And of course, in the wintertime, that can be different, but that's how we've looked at our ratios, to having about 1.6 on the 3-story buildings. But it all has to do with the logic of the type of living that goes into it. And it really almost gets double counted because of the cars behind the garage, or the possibility of them being there.
Okay, and in computing 1.6, are you saying you're including some of the street parking in that calculation, or no?
No, we are not. We are not. We're just making sure especially in something that's so detailed plan like this, is the worst scenario we could ever have is that we miss on the parking. It's like our, it's really what makes, if you go forward with a development of this nature and this size, and then end up being short on parking. And that's why we've brought it all internally on the site. Mm-hmm. To push the buildings up against the roads, and we feel confident that the ratios that we have are needed from all of our experience with this type of product.
And then I'm sorry, you'll have to remind me, because we've looked at a few big projects tonight. There is no metro service out here at this point. Is that right? I can't remember.
No, there is, but if I could have one of the staff members address kind of what the plan is, I really do not exactly know how it will be extended.
Okay, I can ask about that when we get.
Sure thing.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, following up on parking. These units are they 2-bedroom units mostly, or 3-bedroom units, or can you answer those questions?
Am I on mute?
Mr. Raditz, you're on.
Actually, could Mark Ott address?
That's fine. Mark Ott can speak to it. Mr. Ott?
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. All of the townhouse units, all of the T units, which would be on lot 1, are 2-bedroom units. All of the S units, which are on lot 2, are also 2-bedroom units. And then I'd have to pull up the right slide. The apartment buildings, which is on lot 3, the A buildings, are kind of your standard mix. Each building, for example, has 3 3-bedrooms. I think there's 12 total on the site. And then the remainder of the 208 units are kind of divided between 2 bedrooms and 1 bedroom. So there is a mix, on the apartments, as you'd kind of expect. but the S's and T buildings, stack flats and townhomes are all 2 bedrooms.
I didn't really investigate parking on this and analyze it, but the lot 1, you're providing a 2-car garage for each of those units. I think that's what you've told us. And for lot 2, I think you're also providing a 2-car garage for those units, I think. But for lot 3, there's a mixture of 2-car and 1-car, I think. And I guess I agree with Commissioner Heck that it appears, and I'll ask staff this question too, that it appears that you're really over parking here, especially if you have a 2-car garage. And I understand with visitors that you'll have those and that it's necessary. But also parking provides asphalt, and it's actually much nicer to provide green space rather than asphalt for these residents out here. So I guess until Commissioner Heck raised the issue about parking, I guess it didn't occur to me, but now it is occurring to me that you're likely over parking this development. So I guess, and I know that you say, well, no, that's not correct, but even for this suburban area, a 2-bedroom with a 2-car garage appears to be adequate for, you're not going to have 4 people likely in that have 4 cars. You're likely to have a maximum of 2 people with 2 cars potentially. For 1 bedroom, you're likely to have 1 car, at least in my estimation, and a 3-bedroom, maybe 2 cars, likely, maybe 3. But again, it appears to me that you're over parking here, and it possibly putting some. And if we're wrong, you could put parking in reserve for future parking if necessary.
Thank you, Mr. Cantrell. Commissioner Cantrell, do you have any further questions of our registrants?
No, I don't.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of our registrants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and we'll move to questions of staff. Do we have questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I'd like to ask staff about the issue of parking. Did they perceive that this was overparked, or did they perceive that the parking was adequate and shouldn't be modified?
Mr. Parks.
Thank you. We didn't take a position one way or the other regarding the proposed parking for the project. It certainly fits within the zoning guidelines. Was not informed by zoning staff that this required a conditional use for excessive parking. At the present time, the area is not particularly well served by Metro Transit. And in full disclosure, I am a resident of the larger surrounding neighborhood. Live about quarter to a half a mile from the site, so I'm quite familiar with it. Transit service is peak hour weekday service, Monday through Friday, AM and PM peak. It's located just over a quarter mile to the north at the intersection of Weston Drive and Maple Grove Drive. And that is 2 lines that come down the 56 and the 57 and provide that rush period service. So the nearest all-day bus stop is about 1.5 miles from this site, north of Highway PD or McKee Road, along Muirfield Road. So it's not terribly well served by Metro Transit at the present. There are some long-term plans as a result of the Fred Maple Grove Drive plat, making the missing connection through the Schmidt farm that might allow Metro to extend service further south of where it currently extends to reach more deeply into the cross-country neighborhood. Those plans are preliminary, but there were some conditions to accommodate future bus stops on Manchester Drive and on Rockstream Drive that would allow the two routes that provide the rush period service to at least extend further south into the neighborhood. So it's possible that in the future, the surface or the parking that's proposed right now might not be fully needed, but that would likely occur once better transit service was extended to this part of the neighborhood.
Any other questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No.
Okay, thank you. Alder Heck.
Thank you. Sorry to belabor this, but a question for Mr. Parks then. On page 3 of the staff report, can you explain the automobile parking stall requirements, what the minimum and the maximum numbers mean then? Is the max the max?
Let me just pull that up.
Just at the bottom of page 3.
Yes, thank you. So, okay. Yeah, I see the potential disconnect between those ranges for lots 1 and 3 compared to what's proposed. I think the max does not account for structured stalls. So from the perspective that, for example, lot 1 has 64 surface stalls, that falls between the 50 and the 100, and that the 2-car garages would not count towards that in the zoning code. And I believe that is also likewise the case. The 50 that are in I'm sorry, the 50 in garages on lot 3 on the over-under units, I apologize for referring to them as stacked flats before, that only the 36 parking stalls that are on the surface would count towards the min-max. So we don't have parking in excess of the maximum allowed by the zoning code, because most of those stalls that you see in the left, or I'm sorry, in the right 3 columns are accounted for within structure and therefore don't count towards that maximum.
Okay, thank you.
I see that we've Mr. Tucker, did you have something to add?
Yeah, Tim, you got it. Yeah, that was correct. Tim, you hit the deal. The structured parking does not count towards that maximum when you're doing the math. Thanks, Tim.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Tucker. Alder Rummel.
Now I'm interested in this question, and maybe not for this parcel, but how come we don't include structured when they're surface? I don't think I realized that. Some more sort of history, please.
Well, we might pivot back to Mr. Tucker on this one.
Mr. Tucker, you're on for this one.
Sure.
Thank you.
I was also hoping to answer the question.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry. Well, either one of you can respond.
Oh, I'll start. Initially, when the city was working on the new zoning ordinance, they took a pretty hard look at parking, and one of the things that they wanted to encourage was structured parking. And so when they looked at, we took that first decision towards a new regulation, which would be establishing a maximum parking requirement and reducing the minimum. And in many cases, what we ended up doing was lowering the overall amount of parking, but the intent was to try and address it from a surface parking standpoint. So the ordinance pivots in the parking reduction section to recognize that to encourage the structured parking arrangement, basically to in effect discourage surface style parking.
Thank you, Mr. Tucker. Did you have something to add then, Mr. Parks?
Matt largely covered it. I don't think previous to now there's really been a thought about whether a project with so much structured parking either in garages or below the building might also have too much surface parking. I suppose that's something that we could review in terms of a future zoning code amendment. But Matt largely hit the nail on the head in terms of what we were going for with the zoning code rewrite of a few years back.
Thank you, Mr. Parks.
And thanks for that explanation. And I would like you to put it on your to-do list, because it seems that Commissioner Heck was kind of catching something with being overparked, but not per our zoning code's goals. But thank you. So I appreciate that.
Okay, any other questions of staff? Okay, then I will be looking for a motion. Commissioner Cantrell.
I'll move that the Plan Commission find the standards are met for the conditional use for this residential building complex and accessory outdoor recreation at 3840 Maple Grove Drive, including the addendum for condition number 5.
And if, do we have a second? Alder Lemmer?
Yep, I second his motion.
Thank you. Commissioner Cantrell, did you wish to speak to your motion?
Yes, I think this is overall a good project, but I do think that we'll have to investigate, or at least I'll have to investigate parking a little bit more in the future on projects like this that are more suburban. And I guess I didn't understand that we didn't count in indoor parking when we had surface parking, so those really weren't counted in the parking calculation. So, but anyway, I think it's overall a decent project for this area.
Thank you. Other comments in regard to this project before we take a vote? And again, I will assume unanimous consent unless there's a raised hand to object. Seeing none, motion passes. Next item on our agenda is agenda item 13, the last item to cover, and it is Legistar 59522, 2021 Winnebago Street, 6th Alder District, consideration of a conditional use in the traditional shopping street district for limited production and processing of coffee and baked goods in a restaurant. And I think we have Ms. Prusak, who's going to be speaking to this project.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair and members of the Plan Commission. The applicant requests approval of a conditional use for limited production and processing of coffee and baked goods in a restaurant within an existing mixed-use building. As proposed, coffee roasting will occur 2 to 3 times per week from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m., and the bakery will operate between 3 to 5 times per week from 7 a.m. to 3 p.m. As a condition of approval, the Planning Division recommends limiting the hours of operation for the coffee roaster to what is proposed, with no roasting allowed on the weekends and city holidays. Any change in the roasting hours or equipment used will require a conditional use alteration. While all the potential impacts are not known, staff anticipates that if well managed, the requests can be found to meet the conditional use approval standards, but requests that the Plan Commission give careful consideration to the approval standards in making their motion and subsequent action. Approval Standard 16 relates directly to limited production and processing and states, when applying the approval standards to an application for limited production and processing use, the Plan Commission shall consider the effect of such use on surrounding properties, including the effects of odor, noise, vibration, glare, hours of operation, and other potential side effects of a manufacturing process. The Plan Commission should consider the intensity, duration, and variability of the odors emitted by roasting operations and their impacts on surrounding property. I'll defer to the applicant to describe the roasting process in more detail during their presentation and questions from commissioners. While there's dense residential development near the subject site, staff notes that Winnebago Street and Atwood Avenue are neighborhood commercial quarters with a variety of commercial and service businesses. Staff also believes that this proposal is generally consistent with the neighborhood mixed-use commercial recommendations in the city's comprehensive plan. At the time of report writing, staff received a letter of support from the Sassy Neighborhood Association and a few other nearby neighbors. Today, staff received one letter in opposition in regards to the odors associated with coffee roasting, which has just been added to the legislative file. So with all that being said, if the Plan Commission can find the approval standards for conditional uses are met, then the Planning Division recommends that the Plan Commission approve the request to allow limited production and processing at a food sales business on a property zone traditional shopping street at 2021 Winnebago Street. If the Plan Commission chooses to add additional conditions of approval to limit impacts, planning and zoning staff discourage the Commission from attempting to regulate the proposed conditional use with conditions that rely on uncontrollable variables, such as weather conditions, which will be really difficult to enforce and will create an environment of uncertainty for all the stakeholders involved. And so thank you for your time, and I'll be able to answer questions after the public hearing.
Thank you, Ms. Prusak. I will open the public hearing. We do have a couple of registrants that wish to speak. The first one is Peter Kersel, 2188 Haywood Circle, Fitchburg, Wisconsin, in support wishing to speak, representing Dacha House LLC. Mr. Kersel, you are on.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. 3 minutes.
Great, thank you.
Thank you.
I'm trying to share the screen too. I have his presentation up.
Oh yeah. Go ahead, Sydney.
I don't know. There we go.
All right, okay. If you run those, Sydney, approximately 15 seconds or so, my narrative is just going to be parallel and not going to be describing these slides in particular. So thank you, Madam Chair, Commission members. My partner Ellen and I bought this building in 2012. I'm a career visual arts professional, former painting faculty at the University of Illinois, Champaign-Urbana, and at UW-Madison. I've used the back portion of the building, approximately 1/3, as my studio where I pursue my art practice. The building history is sparse, but there's some things we know. It was built in approximately 1905 by Polk Manufacturing Company and operated a company called Madison Pattern Works through the middle of the 20th century. Other notable occupants of the building are Capital Water Softener, circa 1936, three generations of Ticey Printing from 1950 to 2012, Door Pottery from 2013 to 2015, and my most recent tenant was Arts and Literature Laboratory from 2015 to 2019. 2021 Winnebago is in the North Winnebago portion of the Schenck Corners Business District, as defined by the Schenck-Atwood Neighborhood Business District Master Plan from December of 2000. Schenck's Corners is the commercial core of the Schenck-Atwood neighborhood. It's described as the beating heart of Madison's East Side by David Medeiros in a 2008 Isthmus article. Amid the COVID-19 crisis, the heart's still beating in the neighborhood, albeit on some level of temporary life support. A micro coffee roaster, gluten-free bakery, and cafe would broaden the mix of businesses in the area, dominated by bars and salons. As COVID-19 plays out, the project could play a really vital role in breathing life back into the district. So it should not go without mention also that the Shanks Corners Business District is adjacent to the East Wach Growth Priority area identified by the city. The development is in keeping with the city's goals and objectives under the heading Preservation and Sustainability. Our objective as building owners is to employ a sustainable strategy. So we reuse materials from the site, including molding, trim, recovered floor joists, and planking. We use salvage materials from other local and regional sources when appropriate and available. For example, deconstruction, habitat restore. Adaptive reuse is a development philosophy that Ellen and I believe contributes to the essential character of a business district. It tends to draw local business owners who know and live with their customers. Our proposal can be described as a business use evolution that parallels the city's zoning and development evolution. Prior to 2014, the site was zoned C1, which included manufacturing and wholesale permitted uses.
Sorry, that's the time.
Okay,
Can you wrap up in a sentence or two, please?
Absolutely. TSS, as you know, allows businesses to retain a portion of their manufacturing and wholesale operation along with a retail component as a conditional use. So what I really want to make the point is that the efficacy of limited production and processing comes into focus more clearly, not only in the context of pre-COVID-19 crisis, but it's also a vertical survival strategy that's essential to businesses whose retail businesses have all but disappeared or morphed into a new normal business model. Thanks. And I'd also like to note that my team partners in this, Kyle and Gwen Johnson, are available, as well as Megan Heil.
Thank you, Mr. Kersel. Any questions of Mr. Kersel before we move on to the other registrants? Okay, the next registrant is Kyle Johnson, 1221 Sherman Avenue, in support and wishing to speak. Mr. Johnson.
Hello.
Hello.
Yeah, Kyle Johnson here with Kin Coffee and Johnson Public House, and also Mint Mark. We think that 2021 Winnebago would be just a wonderful spot for our micro coffee roastery, little cafe, little bakery. Really, we think that would add a lot to the neighborhood. Our roastery, the concerns that most people have are the smell that would come off of it. We're very small. Roasting right now only 2 days a week for about 3 to 4 hours between 9 and noon. Obviously, we're still looking to grow a little bit, but not really expand over what we're doing, at least in this building that we're looking at. I would compare us to like a one barrel compared to like the letter that we saw that just came in was talking about Steep and Brew, and we know that their roasting facility, they have like 100 different coffees. We have 4 different coffees, so I don't really think it's a comparable thing for us. Yeah, we just really want to be part of the neighborhood, really bring people together, do something similar to what we've done on Johnson Street, and just activate the neighborhood. And I think that we'd be a good fit. That's what I got.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Johnson. The next registrant is showing up as Kyle Johnson again. My guess is that that's supposed to be Gwen Johnson, also 1221 Sherman Avenue, in support and not wishing to speak. The next registrant is Megan Heil, 610 Piper Drive, Madison, in support, not wishing to speak, available to answer questions. And the last registrant is Walter Roy Leatham, 2133 Oak Ridge Avenue, in support, not wishing to speak, but available to answer questions. Questions of any of the registrants? Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I have a question for Gwen or Kyle Johnson about the roasting.
Okay, Mr. Johnson, you're on.
Sure.
Go ahead, Mr. Commissioner Cantrell.
Yes, in your application, you say that you like to be able to roast 2 to 3 days per week, and preferably on Monday and Thursday. And in the staff report, it really opened it up even to more days. It opened it up through Monday through Friday. So I guess I would like to, because of the potential that people have raised a concern about the odors, I'd like to reduce that to what you've requested. So if it's 2 days or 3, which other day during the week would you like to roast in addition to Monday and Thursday, if you know now?
I mean, currently wouldn't have any idea what other day we'd want to roast if we were going to add another day. The reason we put in those other days was to just leave it open for the possibility. I mean, the facility is only so big. If we were roasting Monday through Friday, that facility wouldn't be able to hold all our coffee. That wouldn't even be really a possibility. But if we're going to add another day, I mean, it would be during the week. And most likely, if we're adding another day, the Monday or Thursday might switch as well. It would be like Monday, Wednesday, Friday. But like those 3 days just in general would add enough roasting time that even if we were going to grow, it would be sufficient. We just wanted to leave the options open in case, like, sporadically, or like in case we needed to add like a 4th day. I would never see us roasting all week.
Well, I was going to suggest a kind of an addendum to that condition to allow the planning director and Alder to approve an additional day during the week, but limit you to 2 days initially. And if you find that you want to roast an additional day or even 2 days, that could be possible through the planning director and Alder rather than through the commission.
I would just like to add 3 days then off the bat, just because schedules change and I can't just 100% commit that every week of every month that it's going to be the exact same day because things change.
Okay, that's good. I'll then follow up with staff regarding what I'm suggesting as a revised condition. Thank you.
Sure, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Alder Rummel.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Hi, Kyle. Hi, Peter. This question's for Kyle and Gwen. When we talked, you went to a lot of explanation, and the staff report goes into it about your technology, and you kind of hinted at they're the small kid on the block compared to, say, a Stephen Brew. But talk more about how the technology you think is a low impact as far as smell emissions, et cetera.
Sure. I mean, so right now, our roaster that we use is a Probat P12. So 12 kilos. Our max batch is 18 pounds going in. We roast for 11, 12 minutes. Our roasting process, I'm not sure how many people are familiar with coffee roasting, but we're pretty specific. We don't roast past first crack, which as you're developing coffee and roasting, there's different processes that happen. First crack is one of the first main things that happen, and that's where a lot of the flavor comes from. And a lot of the oils are being developed and pushed out. That's when we drop the coffee into the cooling drum. I would say most of the other coffee roasters around town roast much past that to second crack, where the oils are like fully getting pushed out of the coffee. A lot of smoke starts to develop, and instead of developing the coffee, you're just kind of creating carbon. We have a cyclone attached to our coffee roaster, which sucks the chaff out, so all the particles coming off the coffee bean are getting sucked out and pushed into a drum below. And then all the exhaust is the rest is getting pushed out through a vent currently on top of a building that we are roasting now. It would be the similar situation in 2021. We're going to go as high as we can go. I mean, if you're standing next to the building while we're roasting and the wind's coming down to you, you're most likely going to smell it. It smells like baked bread. I was really trying to get you out there to see how low impact our roastery is in the smell. But if you're 40, 50 feet away, that smell is lost. We're not really creating much of an impact.
Thank you.
Yep.
Commissioner Rui.
Hi, thank you. I had a question about venting. You've got 3 locations shown on the building where you are potential roasteries, and they're all in the south, or on the alley side of the building. How are they going to be vented? Straight up on the roof?
Yeah, they'll be vented straight up, through the roof.
How high are those vents going to be?
As high as we can potentially get them.
Like higher than the building next door?
No.
Okay, but as high as you can get them. Okay, thanks. I personally am not too concerned about the smell, but I'll get to that later. Thanks. Bye.
Any other questions of any of the applicants? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing. Are there questions of staff? Commissioner Cantrell.
I guess I just like to ask staff about what I just raised as a altered condition of maybe putting a little bit more restrictions on 3 days, and then allow the planning director and the alder to adjust those as necessary.
Ms. Prusak?
Yes, so part of the reason why it was open-ended was to allow some flexibility for them to decide when they're roasting, but inconsistent being within those hours. That's consistent with other applications. But if you do choose to restrict the number of days, we need you to specify the days that roasting is allowed to occur in case there are complaints or there is a violation, that we have the specific days that they're allowed to roast. So you can, instead of saying Monday through Friday, it could say Monday, Wednesday, Friday, and then the way that the condition is written will allow for a minor alteration to those days if things are going well.
Thank you.
Mr. Tucker, do you have something to add to that?
Yeah, just to emphasize from an enforcement standpoint, with Sydney saying picking the days will help us specifically respond to complaints. Just giving them 3 days in a week would be, our experience with that has been, we don't know when that first day starts. So we want the specific days selected.
Thank you. Did you have any other questions, Commissioner Cantrell?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Alder Rummel.
I'm not sure this is quite a question, but when I read the condition, it talks about exclusive of city holidays. So I would just ask us to think about how a Monday holiday would fit in if we included Monday as one of the days for roasting. So more just thinking through what that would mean. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Hagenow.
I just had a thought on, if we do try to limit it to specific days as well, given the current condition that we're all in right now with the pandemic, what if you're sick on Monday and that's when you got to roast and now you don't have beans for Tuesday? Or I just worry that creates a whole nother set of problems. So need to think about that.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other questions of staff? Okay, I am looking for a motion. Commissioner Rui.
Thank you. I move approval of the conditional use as is. I can explain why if I get a second.
Commissioner Cantrell?
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Rui?
Am I back again?
Yes, you are.
The reason limiting is a good idea, but it becomes logistical for many reasons. If we do have a problem, we have ongoing jurisdiction, and we can cut back the hours in the future if we have a problem or add more restrictions. We've done that in the past on some other conditional uses, but we do have a continuing jurisdiction on this if we have problems.
Thank you, Commissioner Rui. Alder Rummel.
Thank you. I do support the conditional use. As the applicant and the property owner know, I right away was all about the smells, having lived through some other, over the years, other issues. And I really wanted to appreciate the application that had all the maps with different, the 200 to 400 feet. That was really good, Peter. Thank you. I just want to say that Johnson Public House has got some of the best coffee in the universe. And my neighborhood and everyone else in the Near East Side and anywhere throughout the city, once they learn about it, is going to love it. It's so good. I'm a coffee snob, and I think they're one of the best that I've ever had. So I think they'll be an instant hit. And so if the pressures to grow get strong and they're suddenly roasting more and it's an issue, I'm sure I will hear about it. So I feel like the continuing jurisdiction is fine. I don't, I've talked to them several times that they don't really plan to go beyond what they're at now, but eventually they might, right? So we'll come to that when we come to it. And Kyle, I'm sorry I never made it out to the roaster, but I decided after you told me about the machine that you used, it would be worth, it wouldn't be as bad as our neighbor who wrote in thought it would be. So thank you.
Thank you, Alder. Commissioner Cantrell.
Well, I can't wait to have the best coffee in the universe. I'm going to really enjoy that coffee, I'm sure. But I'm supporting the motion. I think that my suggestion would have been very complicating an issue that shouldn't be overcomplicated. I think this is going to be a good use for the area and can't wait to try the bakery as well.
Okay. Thank you, Commissioner Cantrell. Commissioner Rui?
Midmark has good coffee too. I think they're the same roaster.
That's it?
Yep.
Okay. It's time, seeing no other comments, it's time for a motion, and it's time to vote, and I'm going to assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Seeing none, motion passes. And I think the next, is there any other business by members? Seeing none, I will be looking for a motion to adjourn. Moved by Commissioner Cantrell, seconded by Commissioner Hagenow. All those I'll assume unanimous consent unless I see a raised hand. Okay, thank you very much for this, and hopefully it'll go smoother next time. So thank you.